Shalom, shalom. Giving honor and praise to the Most High, Creator and the Maker of heaven and earth. My name is Yeshaya Yisrael of the tribe of Dan of the nation of Israel. This is a presentation being brought to you from Shema Yisrael, Hebrew Israelite congregation based out of Brooklyn, New York. Giving due respect on the human level to princely poor, as well as Prince Nathanael and our beloved Chief Nathanael of the tribe of Lewi. Also, giving due respect on the human level to my assistant, Josiah ben Sar Nathanael of that tribe of Lewi. Giving due respect to Kohen Mikael, my Hebrew teacher and Hebrew instructor. Brothers and sisters, this particular teaching will be liked by some and not liked by some. However, I have no problem with constructive criticism. Have no problem with somebody pulling my coattail. Have no problem with somebody letting me know a deeper or better understanding concerning a matter. As the Hebrew classes, so is this in regards to the fact that anything that's said in here, even if you don't see it typed in or on a PowerPoint aspect, it's all important nonetheless. We're going to rise, face the east, and call upon Yah, Creator, Maker of heaven and earth. Hallelujah! Hallelujah! Melech ha'olam, bebakwasha, al hayom hazeh, al hayom harishon hazeh, anaknu shoalim olka, lisloak kolanu, lisloak et kol katotenu, lisloak et kol pishaenu, lisloak kol meluk lachenu, melech ha'olam bebakwasha, shub lanu, bebakwashaya, tarbutenu, sifatenu, shub lanu, et bigdenu, mishpakotenu, Yehovah melech ha'olam, titeng lanu, et ruach kazakwa be'eneaka, melech ha'olam bebakwasha, salak lanu mekol had barim asher hara'im asher asinu be'eneaka, yom yom, Yehovah Elohei Yisrael, ha'el ha'ro'eh ha'kol, wa'ha'el asher lo yera'eh, ha'el ha'shofet ha'kol, wa'ha'el asher lo yishapet, atahu we'en kimoka, b'shamayim ba'aretz, ein yoshev al kis'eka, ein moshia milbadeka, ki ata Yoshia et Israel mekol zarenu anatnu shoalim olka anatnu mitpalim lefaneka Yehovah melech olam tibarekna et maaseh nasi zipor wagam et nasi Nathanael wagam et sar Nathanael mematelewi bebakusha Yehovah Elohei Yisrael tirpana with tianaim sar kazak with gam came bebakusha Yehovah Eloheinu tianaim achil yiskak Yehovah melech olam Tibarekna et azir Nezekia ben sar kebron mematelewi. Yehovah melech ha'olam bebakwasha. Tis korna et zikron sar shimon memakane benazakin. Wagam et morehoshea memakane hashaba Yisrael. Melech ha'olam bebakwasha. Tibarekna et maaseh nasi Yasuel. Wagam et maaseh rab zuridan ben more Mishael. Bebakwasha Yehovah Eloheinu. Tatzliak et maaseh yadehem. Wagam king na Yehovah Zebaot, Ataha El, Ataha Ose, Ataha Gorem, Ataha Gomer, Ataha Maklit, Wagam king Atah Ha El Hamashkit, Al Tashkik, Bebakusha et Amnu, Ki Anaknu Bakolim, Anaknu Zorkim Gam Kain Oka Lihiyot Bakayenu, Shub Nanu Bebakusha, et Mishpakotnu, et Hahorim El Yeladim. Wagam kain el ha'abot with emot el yeladehem wagam kain el yeladehen melech ha'olam bebakwasha till we na et ak la akoto wagam kain isha la akota beats the kwabe eneka Yehovah Eloheinu na Yahzabaot titain ruach kazakwa la asot had barim hatobim be eneka tirpa na Kohen Pikas, Wagam King Yehovah Zebaot, Melech Olam, Tiana Ito, Wagam King Tibarekna et Beit, Sor Malaki, Wagam et Isto, Wagam King Yeladot Tayo, Yehovah, Melech Olam Bebakwasha, Al Tishkak, et mori. Kohe Mikael be ibrit. With Tiena ito be eret Guyana. Meleka olam be bakusha. Tiena imakane bene adat. With Tibne ota be bakusha. Lihiyok metuba be eneka. Im ata tirze o im aka rotse. Im ata tik pats be bakusha be eneka hakanina. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. Amen. Amen. Giving honor and praise to the creator and maker of heaven and earth. We want to sit there and have this particular teaching done and to be presented. Now, we're going to go on in this particular teaching in this particular regard. Genesis chapter 25, verse 30. And Genesis chapter 25, verse 25. Okay? Now, I'm going to ask the brother to go to Genesis chapter 25, verse 25. All right? And it reads as this. And Esau said to Jacob, let me swallow, I pray thee, some of this red pottage, for I am faint. Therefore was his name called Edom. Now I'm going to ask the brother to sit there and read. All right? Genesis chapter 25, verse 25. All right? So it can be noted for edification purposes. Thank you.
And the first came forth ruddy, all over like a hairy mantle. And they called his name Esau.
Now, one of the things to point out in this particular regard is this. The first came out ruddy. Now, the reason why I set the PowerPoint where he was called Esau and why he was called Esau first, all right, is because he wanted the red pottage, all right? And now concerning his birth, it says, and the first came forth ruddy, all over like a hairy mantle, and they called his name Esau. Now, in the Hebrew, we see this in the bottom. It says, Wa'yedze harishon ad amoni kulo ka'a deret se'ar wa'yikra'u shemo Esau. Now, the word Esau means one that is wasted, basically, in translation. Now, when you go and you see where it says ruddy, we want to explain that for edification purposes. All right? Admoni is the word that's there. But the word admoni in Hebrew means red-haired. That's why we see all over there, it says all over like a hairy mantle. So he was noted and called that or known as such due to the color of his hair. All right, this is something we want to point out for edification purposes. The word admoni is also used when describing King David. Now, as we know, King David came out of the tribe of the house of Judah. All right, so we can gain some understanding of what we're talking about. All right, so next slide, my brother. Thank you. It says this, the matter of the word ruddy. All right. It says this. The word translated as ruddy in Hebrew is admon or admoni. The significant root being Adam. Adam means man and Adama means ground. The word also means tawny. So the word Adom, said by some as Edom, means tawny. Tawny doesn't mean the average quote unquote color red that we're seeing in many cases. All right. So it's more so of a brownish red. You may say like two different types of colors that are put together, like red and white make pink. All right. So now when you're looking at this particular aspect, so when we're going to sit there and show what tawny color looks like. All right. Next slide. Thank you. The color of what is Adem ruddy / cornelian. Now, when you're looking at this particular thing right here, these are gems that actually come out of the earth. And the color of them as shown is ruddy. This is what ruddy looks like. So ruddy doesn't look Caucasian looking or quote unquote looking like a so-called white man, which is the backdrop color of the things there. Because as you see, the actual PowerPoint is background is black and then the words are yellow and then the actual parts where I put the pictures on is white. But the actual color thing that you see right there, when it says the color of ruddy, this is how it looks. All right, so this is what we want to point out for edification purposes. This becomes important as we go along in this particular teaching. All right, next slide, my brother. Thank you. Genesis chapter 36, verse 8. In Genesis chapter 36, verse 19. All right. So I'm going to ask the brother to sit there and read. It says, and Esau dwelt in the mountain land of Seir. Esau is Edom. Now, I'm going to ask the brother to read Genesis chapter 36, verse 19. And here's what it says. Thank you.
These are the sons of Esau, and these are their chiefs. The same is Edom.
So one of the things we wanted to point out is the fact of it saying that Esau is Edom. So when you read about the children of Esau or Esau and the children of Edom, it's one and the same in that particular aspect. So now when it says that Esau dwelt in the land, in the mountain land of Seir, now on the map, you see right there where that particular land is. The water that you see south of that is like the Gulf of Aqaba. Then south of that, you have what's referred to as the Red Sea. Now, geographically today, they refer to that land in part by the vicinity known as Saudi Arabia. All right. So the children of Esau lived geographically in the land today in northern Saudi Arabia. So this is one thing we want to point out. All right. It says, and Esau dwelt in the mountain land of Seir. So now when you go later on in the book of Obadiah, it says what? That Esau set his nest above the stars. That's what it talks about. You understand? So that way it can be noted for edification purposes. Now, the land that we see there in the map that says S-E-A-R, also like the Sinai, like Egypt, like Lebanon, like Jordan, like Saudi Arabia, like Yemen and Oman, is also referred to in today's terminologies as part of what they call the Middle East. So now, even if we take that term, a term that was created in the year 1902 by an East Indian man named Mahan, all right? Even if you take that term, by the brothers who are teaching that the Edomites or the children of Esau are all the Caucasian, aka the white man, woman, and child of today, are we saying that the true home of the white man is in what you call the Middle East? Are we saying that the white man came from out of the line of the Hebrews? So these are things we want to point out for edification purposes. All right. So now with that in mind, let's go on to the next slide. Thank you, my brother. Exodus chapter 15 says this. Then were the chiefs of Edom affrighted, the mighty men of Moab trembling taketh hold upon them. All the inhabitants of Canaan are melted away. Now the Hebrew says this. Az, Nib, Halu, Alufe Edom, Ele Moab, Yo Kazemo Ra'ad, Na Mogu, Kol, Yoshbe, Canaan. Now in the book of Zechariah, chapter 12, verse 5, I'm going to ask the brother to read that. Thank you, my brother.
And the chiefs of Yehuda shall say in their heart, the inhabitants of Jerusalem are my strength, though through Yah of hosts, their God.
So this is what we want to point out for reason and purposes. All right. Now, thank you, my brother. Now, when you look there in the green, all right, in the Hebrew, it says Alufe, and then the other part says Alufe. Now, I'm going to read the one on the right-hand side says this. Wa amru Alufe Yahuda, Bilbam. Now, Bilbam means in their heart. All right, Leb means heart. You got the aspect with the Lamed, with the Shawal. If you go over back to lesson 6 in the Hebrew class being redone, you'll see that. So you just join it on with the sound beforehand. See how all the classes are connecting? Now, getting back into the point, it says this. Wa amru alufe Yahuda. Now, aluf is generally the term that a lot of brothers who are teaching that Esau is the white man says aluf means duke, D-U-K-E. But one of the things I wanted to point out is the same word aluf also means chief. So though the translation in English, when you read about the dukes of Edom in the book of Genesis and so forth and so on in the English, the word in there is aluf from the Hebrew root word elef, which means clan or thousand. So when it speaks about the chiefs of them, it speaks about the heads of the thousands of such and such. So these are things we want to point out for edification purposes. It's used in the same Hebrew concerning Edom and concerning Judah. So there is no deeper meaning about the English translation of Duke, D-U-K-E. Some people try to say Duke University in North Carolina has something to do with that, but maybe so. Maybe the person liked the English translation and just wanted to put that in there. However, the Hebrew lets it be known that a Duke in that regard is the same as a chief once it came down even to the tribe of Judah. that we see in Zechariah. So these are things to be noted for edification purposes. Brothers and sisters, it says, and the chiefs of Judah shall say in their heart, the inhabitants of Jerusalem are my strength, through the Lord of hosts their God. So now what's going on in Zechariah 7? It talks about the restoration of the tribes of Israel, in this part being Judah, once it comes down to them going back into and being inside of the land. Why does this become important, brothers and sisters? Is because when you're dealing in this particular regard, when you're dealing in this particular aspect, there were chiefs in the house of Israel. There were chiefs in the house of Israel. So all of there was no rank and file on this and that, and why do I have to listen to such and such? Like we went over before in a discussion last week concerning the matter of Simeon and Amalek, Joshua didn't question Moses. You understand? Even when the time when Moses had to, in layman terms, that told Joshua, son, relax with that. Relax with that. Oh, Eldad and Medad prophesying in the camp, I'm gonna slay him. You will not do that. Yo, you need to hold that down. You feel me? And put it in layman terms, like, no, I wish everyone were prophets so they can see what I see. Did Joshua get in his feelings like, yo, what's the point in having soldiers? You ain't going to use them. No, Joshua knew when to fall back. And he was a respected man of the Most High God. The Most High spoke to Joshua. You understand? The Most High spoke to Joshua through an angel of Yah as well. So Joshua didn't sit there and lose his place and then ultimately lose his cool and then got demoted like Saul did. See character? Know when to fall back, you maintain your position. It says, not that Joshua is a fool. It says even a fool, when he holds his peace, is counted wise. So how much more a man of the Most High like Joshua, when he holds his peace, know when the time to speak, know when to refrain from speaking. So when your superior is telling you, relax with that. It ain't the time for all that right now. To put it, if you want to put it in street terms, in the book of Numbers, when Eldad and Medad was prophesying in the camp, and basically Joshua was Moses' minister, and his assistant, into a certain regard, was like, nah, the Moshe is the man. So these guys prophesying too was like, you're not the prophets, he is. So you know what? I'm gonna fall on you. And the person he respected as the prophet, Moshe, was like, you will not sit there and fall on them. You need to pipe that down. You need to relax with that, Joshua. I wish everybody was able to see what I see. That's the role of a leader and a true general, knowing when to tell the soldiers, relax. It ain't that serious. What they doing is something that you probably didn't even see that I wanted. But you like, yo, I'm going out for my mans. That's my peoples. That's my leader right there. You know what I'm saying? You ain't going to disrespect my mans like that. There are people who are like that. You understand? That's why Nathan had to know how to approach David. You understand? Oh, you're an adulterer. Somebody in David's side as his mans, to put it in layman terms, would have rolled his head down the steps like, yo, you ain't going to step to him like that. You understand? But that's how, when you're feeling somebody, respecting somebody, if you truly respect and feel that person as your leader, then you will sit there and know to respect orders. And it doesn't make you any less of a man. Joshua is more so known for Jericho. They're more so known for having to be told, relax with that. When you think about Joshua, most people, Joshua in the Battle of Jericho, that's what most people mostly think about. They're not thinking about the fact that Moshe had to tell him at one time, hold that down, relax with that. That's not what we about. We didn't come out here for all of that drama. You understand? Like Saul, not knowing his superior, who was Samuel, and so forth, how to go and rank and file. There's an order to certain things. And so what does it say here concerning the chiefs of Judah? It says, through the Most High of hosts, their God. So the ultimate chief is Yah. And everything falls under rank with that one. You understand? Let that be noted for edification purposes. Next slide, my brother. Thank you. Here we go. Papyrus regarding Hadad/Wormai in the matter of Israel in the era of Dynasty 18. All right. Now, this is concerning an Egyptian record referred to commonly now as the Papyrus Moscow. Just like the Europeans took the Egyptian records and put their names on it, calling it Moscow, this and that, so did the Europeans take the Hebrew records and call it a Bible. There's no Hebrew word for Bible. Right. 2 books. Biblos, books. The Tanakh is in Hebrew acronym meaning Torah, Nebe'im, and Ketubim. So they took the Tau, the Nun, and the Kaf. But there's no Hebrew word for Bible. So that's another subject. But we want to sit there and to get into this particular aspect in this particular regard. Okay? And it says this: flight to Seir. If only I had sent him off to Narin in order to fetch the hidden gemstone, he would then have gone to the people of Seir, example, the Edomites, and he would have returned to us again. Would that he had reached my people, the Edomites. All right, so what is that being stated in that particular regard? All right, is this the flight of Hadad, the Edomite, 1 Kings chapter 11. Now, this is concerning the era of what happened during the era of Solomon. All right, so we can gain an understanding of what we're talking about. So Hadad in the scriptures is known in Egyptian as what? Wermai. So all of the notes is written in that particular regard. All right. So now when you look at the other side of it, the right side of this particular PowerPoint, this is the Israel. Israel in Egyptian is Yisrael. We already went over this in a thing called From Avaris to Alabama, the Travels of the Children of Israel. You can look that up on this particular channel. So you had the Y aspect, and then the S aspect, then the R aspect, and the I aspect. Now, when I did a video entitled Hebrew stands on its own merit, not out of Egypt, I showed the hieroglyphic aspect and how that particular thing worked. This is, as I'm presenting, brothers and sisters, for those who may be following and familiar with this, they may say, what am I talking about? Saying this is era of Dynasty 18, thinking that this coming from the Meneptah stele must have been from Dynasty 19 as the son of Ramses II. What I'm presenting is this: what they refer to as the Meneptah stele or the Israel stela in archaeology and so forth and so on was actually written by a pharaoh named Amenhotep, brothers and sisters, the third. And Merneptah later on added on to that. You can tell by the particular things that's spoken about in that particular thing. Ancient Egyptian pharaohs actually at different points put their names on other people's monuments. So if, let's say, Pharaoh Pepi of Dynasty 6 did something, it was not too far-fetched for Seti the first of Dynasty 19 to add on his name to it. Because according to Egyptian theology, the Pharaoh was the son of their god. All right? So being the son of their particular god, it wasn't the Pharaoh that did it. It was the god within that particular Pharaoh that did it. So you can put your name on any monument and everything's supposed to be all right. That's why in Egyptian chronology, they always have to sit there and always try to remember the culture of that particular people, because they didn't go chronology-wise by saying like David, Solomon, Rehoboam, Abijah, Asa, Jehoshaphat, Jehoram, Jehoash, Amaziah, Uzziah, Yotam, Ahaz, Hezekiah, Manasseh, Ammon, Josiah, Jehoiakaz, Jehoiakim, Jehoiachin, and Zedekiah. See, they didn't do that in that particular regard. So going all the way from Solomon to the era of Zedekiah, chronological wise. So when you look at the Royal Turin Papyrus of Dynasty 19 or 20, then you're looking at the Turin Papyrus as stated. You're looking at the Abydos record. You're looking at the Saqqara record. You're looking at the other records of ancient Egypt regarding their particular list of kings. You're always going to have it in conflict, because if they didn't like the king, they didn't put the king inside this register, like Akhenaten, for instance. So now getting into this particular aspect, once it comes down to that, brothers and sisters, is this: when they're trying to sit there and say what is referred to as the Meneptah stele must have only been in Dynasty 19, knowing good and well that Ramses II, his father, put his name on other pharaohs' monuments. He actually took some names off and then said that he did it. So looking at monuments and then trying to look at the chronological list of Egyptian kings, the timeline is always going to sit there and be lopsided and biased, because in the ancient world, among their own people, it was biased. All right. So these are things that we want to sit there and talk about in this particular regard. All right. This particular teaching is in regards to the house of Esau, nonetheless, for those who are commenting. All right. So next slide, please. Thank you, my brother. the Amalekites and the Egyptians in part. It says, when the Israelites left Egypt, we see that the Amalekites attacked the Israelites in Exodus 17. These Amalekites were later the rulers of Dynasty 15, which is after the Exodus. An image of them from 10 is to the right. Now, when you look at the right-hand side of this particular thing here, brothers and sisters, this is referred to as the tennis Hyksos. Now, the Hyksos we went over before in history was simply Hyksos is a terminology meaning shepherd kings, all right, from the Greek. But the actual Egyptian terminology was Hakushosoret, which means, or Hekakasu, said by some, which means rulers of foreign lands. So the foreign lands in Egyptian aspect were not identified, whether it was truly Israel, Hebrew, Edom, the Kassite, the Babylonian, Mitanni, Sumer, and so forth. So these are certain things we want to point out in that particular regard. You can't always glean from the Egyptian records the identity of the peoples that they're talking about nationally because they called them by a generic term once it comes down to that. These are things we want to point out for edification purposes. All right, so now getting into this particular regard, when it says an image of them from Tanis is to the right, Tanis is in northern Egypt. All right, now during the era of Dynasty 15 is when these particular Hyksos ruled in Egypt. All right, so they was called Thalatis, was the first one in the Greek. All right, most of them are known by their later Greek names, even though they themselves were not Greeks. The Hyksos generally come out of the land of Edom, out of the land of Canaan, and out of the land of Aram. Many of them were either biblically known as the Hamites of Canaan or the Shemite, not Semite, but Shemite that comes out of the line of the house of Aram. So these are things we want to point out for edification purposes. When you look at what is remains of the quote unquote fragments from the not Merneptah, but the other Egyptian timeline list. Forget the name, and once I get it, I'll put it inside the comments. All right, inside of the chat or so. But getting back to the point, brothers and sisters, we want to sit there and point this out for reason and purposes. And that is one of the things to point out is these Hyksos that wound up ruling in Egypt in Dynasty 15 were after the Exodus that occurred in Dynasty 13. All right. So now that the camp here, Shema Yisrael, is going into the book of Exodus soon, we'll present more information concerning this kind of matter. All right. Next slide, please. Thank you. It says the Edomites in regards to Assyria. All right. It says there were Edomite kings who were known among the Assyrians. They were written in records by the names Kos Malaka, Malik Ramu, and Kos Gavri. Kos, K-A-U-S in the English spelling, was one of the gods of the Edomites. Now, this becomes important concerning who was a god of the children of Edom. Why does that become important, brothers and sisters? Is because of what we're going to be talking about later concerning the name of the Most High. Okay, so these are things we just want to point out for edification purposes. So they were the Amalekites that you see in the book of Exodus were descended from those who came out of the house of Esau. All right. And they attacked the Israelites. We already went over the matter of Amalek extensively last week in a discussion on this channel called The Matter of Simeon and Amalek. All right. So these are things we want to point out for reason and purposes. Next slide, please. Thank you. And I'm going to ask the brother to read in the book in Deuteronomy chapter 23, verse 7. Now, while he gets there, I want to mention this here. It says David had conquered the Edomites. Under David, there's to say David of the tribe of Judah who ruled over Israel. On the human level, the Israelites controlled a large portion from the Euphrates to the border of Egypt. That comes out of the book Archaeology in the Holy Land by Kathleen Kenyon. And then it says the Israelites had rule over Edom from the era of David to the era of Jehoram of Judah. So Jehoram of Judah, which was after Jehoshaphat. So you had, as stated, David, Solomon, Rehoboam, Abijah, Asa, Jehoshaphat, Jehoram. We're talking approximately over 200 years that the tribes of Israel had rulership over the house of Edom. If we remember the portion, brothers and sisters, that Isaac gave to Esau, he says, when the time of Jacob's triumph is over, you shall break his yoke from off your neck. So Isaac already prophesied about Edom being subservient to the house of Jacob. And then eventually, when Jacob messed up, like in the case of Jehoram and so forth and so on, the Edomites were able to say, okay, done serving you, and so forth. So these are things we want to point out for edification purposes. I'm going to ask the brother to read Deuteronomy chapter 23, and we're going to start in verse 8 in the Masoretic text or in the King James in 23:7. Read on, my brother. Hallelujah.
Thou shalt not abhor an Edomite, for he is thy brother. Thou shalt not abhor an Egyptian, because thou was a stranger in his land.
So with that particular aspect, it says what? You shall not abhor an Edomite, for he is your brother. Now I'm going to ask the brother to go from there to the book of Malachi, chapter 1, verse 1, so we can gain some understanding of what we're talking about. All right, the book of Malachi, chapter 1, verse 1, so we can gain some understanding of what we're talking about, brothers and sisters. All right, thank you, my brother. All right, the book of Malachi is in the Masoretic text before the book of Psalms and after the book of Zechariah. All right, we are in the book of Malachi, which is before the book of Psalms and after the book of Zechariah. You got to turn back. It's the book right before Psalms. All right, Malachi chapter 1, verse 1, and it says this.
Hallelujah. The burden of the word of Yah of Israel by Malachi. I have loved you, saith Yah. Yet ye say, wherein hast thou loved us? Was not Esau Jacob's brother? Saith Yah. Yet I loved Jacob, but Esau I hated.
All right, so it says that the Most High loved Jacob, but Esau he hated. And then ask a question, was not Esau Jacob's brother? All right, so the Most High doesn't sit there and take family favoritism. Read on.
And made his mountains a desolation, and gave his inheritance to the jackals of the wilderness. Whereas Edom saith, we are beaten down, but we will return and build waste places. And build the waste places, saith Yah of hosts. They shall build, but I will throw down, and they shall be called the border of wickedness. And the people whom Yah execrated forever. And
so, told our brother. So the thing I wanted to point out is this. Once it comes down to that particular regard, it says, was not Esau Jacob's brother? So now taking that and going back to the book of Deuteronomy, when it says you shall not abhor an Edomite, for he is your brother, we already showed that Jacob and Esau are brothers. The teaching coming from brothers and sisters who are saying that the white man in general is Esau, they're saying that Deuteronomy chapter 23, verse 7, all right, is truly mistranslated, and that where it says Edom, it should say Aram. Aram in the Greek is Syria. So they're saying that it should say, you should not abhor a Syrian, for he is your brother. But let's look at this particular aspect. First off, because they like to quote certain so-called scholars saying, well, see, yeah, this is really truly mistranslated. But we have to ask, where in the scriptures does it ever say that the Arameans, aka the Syrians, were your brothers? Or does it say that Esau was the brother of Jacob? And was not Jacob later on called Israel, and the descendants of Jacob, aka Israel, were the children of Israel? So, with that particular thing, in that particular aspect, it is an incorrect teaching to sit there and say that the Edomites mentioned in Deuteronomy 23 should accurately be the Syrians or the Arameans. No, the Edomites are the brothers of the Israelites. But because they come with a concept of saying that the white man himself are the true Edomites, and they want to hate the white man, understandably so, for those who lack understanding, but you should not hate anybody, but more so love your own. See, one of the things concerning the white man is this: hating him does not profit the black man, if you want to talk race and colors. Loving the black man, loving the black woman, loving your people will annihilate the authority of white supremacy. See, hating them is not going to hurt them. Loving your own would sit there and hurt them if you want to go that route. It says the man who does not chasten the son loves his enemy. So once we come down to this particular aspect and this particular thing, one of the things we want to point out is that you cannot sit there and teach that Deuteronomy 23 is supposed to be Aram and not Edom. All right, because the Arameans, though they were the relatives of the Israelites, they were not the blood nation brother of the Israelites. Edom was. So this is what we want to point out for edification purposes. All right. So I'm going to ask the brother to go to the book of Joel, chapter 3, verse 19, please. All right. The book of Joel, one of the prophets before Zechariah. All right. Thank you. Joel chapter 3, and we're going to start, brothers and sisters, in verse 19, and it says on this wise. Thank you. Hallelujah. Joel chapter 3, verse 19, and it says this: Egypt shall be a desolation, and Edom shall be a desolate wilderness for the violence against the children of Judah, because they have shed innocent blood in their land. But Judah shall dwell forever in Jerusalem from generation to generation. So when it says that Egypt shall be a desolation, did it not? When you look at Egypt, it basically is a big graveyard. There's people walking around there, but those aren't even the true Egyptians. You understand? So another point to make is this: when it says, and Edom shall be a desolate wilderness, it's talking about the actual land of Edom itself being a desolate wilderness. And we want to sit there and get into this particular aspect. So Malachi, when it says that the Most High will sit there and brought Esau down, these are things we want to talk about. It says we're going to get into the book of Obadiah about what Yah said that he would do concerning the house of Esau. Next slide. Thank you. Joshua chapter 15, verse 21, as well as verse 1, and Joshua chapter 24, verse 8. All right. And it says this: and the lot for the tribe of the children of Judah, according to their families, was unto the border of Edom, even to the wilderness of Zin, southward, at the uttermost part of the south, and the cities at the uttermost part of the tribe of the children of Judah, toward the border of Edom and the south, were Kabzeel and Eder and Yagur. So one of the things we want to point out is geographically, the tribe of Judah did not live but so far from the land of Edom. Edom lived by the tribe of Judah, according when you go to Joshua chapter 15. All right, so now Joshua chapter 24, verse 8. I'm going to ask the brother to read this. Thank you. All right, for edification purposes. All right.
And I gave unto Yitzchak Jacob and Esau, and I gave unto Esau Mount Seir, to possess it. And Jacob and his children went down into Egypt.
Jacob and his children went down into Egypt. Now that comes from out of the book of Joshua, chapter 24, verse 8. So the children of Edom possessed the land of Seir. Now I'm going to ask the brother to go to Deuteronomy chapter 2, verse 12, so we can gain some understanding of what we're talking about. Joshua chapter 24 is when he's going over history concerning the Israelites and his diatribe before his death. All right. So Deuteronomy chapter 2, verse 12. And I'm going to ask the brother Josiah to read in that particular regard. And it says this.
Hallelujah. And in Syria dwelt the Horites aforetime, but the children of Esau exceedingly them, and they destroyed them from before them, and dwelt in their stead, as Israel did unto the land of his possession, which Yah gave unto them.
So what are we reading? The children of Edom actually pushed out and eliminated the people of Seir from that particular land. So what Joshua later on is saying is that the Most High caused the children of Esau, all right, to be able to do so. So these are things we want to point out for edification purposes. All right. So next slide. Thank you. The aspect of the Horites. All right. It says the Horites that were defeated by the Edomites were not all the Horites, just the ones in the region that Edom acquired. The Horites are said to be identified too, meaning also, as the Hurrians, who are part of the Hamite family of peoples. So what do we want to point out for edification purposes is this, is that the people, just as the Israelites went to war with some Hamite nations as the Canaanites, the Edomites went to war with some of the Hamite nations known as the people of Kor. Now, the Hebrew that you see on the right-hand side says this, but Seir Yashbu HaKorim. All right? It says, in Seir dwelt the Korim. The Korim are the Horites. The word Kor in Hebrew means whole, H-O-L-E, and is identified with those who dwelt in caves. The Edomites, after they settled there, too, dwelt in the same aspect, caves and rocks. So these are things we want to point out for edification purposes, brothers and sisters. Now, we know politically, we have it like in Deuteronomy 28, verse 68, where it actually speaks of Egypt by ships. We understand Egypt said in the Hebrew is Mizraim, which means straits. So when you look at, all right, we explained that before. So when we go into the aspect of Kor, meaning whole, H-O-L-E, we can sit there and see how it's identified as such. The Edomites acquired the land by defeating the people of the Horites. All right, this is something we want to talk about for edification purposes in that particular regard. Next slide. Thank you. The land of Petra, aka Basra, where Edom dwelt. What you're looking at there on the left hand and the right hand side are aspects of the lands in quote unquote the same place of Seir, where the children of Esau, then after the Horites lived there, dwelt in. All right, so we can gain when it says in the book of Obadiah, though thou set thy nest as high as the eagle. Ancient Israel did not particularly live on the mountains in that regard. All right, where they lived for the most part regarding Israelites was in a plain or in the city or the field. Remember when it says, cursed shalt thou be in the city, cursed shalt thou be in the field, blessed shalt thou be in the city, and then blessed shalt thou be in the field then. So the city and the field is more so where the Israelites inhabited in ancient times. Whereas once it came down to the people as the cave dwellers, in that regard, the people of Esau, the wasted ones from Esau, meaning that in Hebrew, all right, Petra is also known as Basra, and that's the part in pictures there where the ancient house of Edom lived. So these are things we just want to show for edification purposes. All right, next slide, please. Thank you. 2 Samuel chapter 8 and 2 Kings chapter 8. And he, being David, and he put garrisons in Edom throughout all Edom. Put he garrisons, and all the Edomites became servants to David. And Yah gave victory to David whithersoever he went. In his days, Edom revolted from under the hand of Judah and made a king over themselves. So, what are we seeing? From 2 Samuel chapter 8 to 2 Kings chapter 8, David, all the way down to Jehoram, had rulership over the house of Esau. As we went over before, I just want to show it in the scriptures as I showed it in the archaeology book written by a lady named Kenyon, Kenyon, all right, as we went over earlier. So these are things just want to point out for edification purposes. Okay, next slide. Thank you. Psalms 137. Let's go in. By the rivers of Babylon, there we sat down, yea, we wept, when we remembered Zion. We hanged our harps upon the willows in the midst thereof. For there they carried us away captive. We cried, for there they that carried us captive, we cried of us a song. And they that wasted us required of us mirth, saying, sing unto us of the songs of Zion. How shall we sing the Most High song in a strange land? If I forget thee, O Yarushalem, let my right hand forget her cunning. If I do not remember thee, let my tongue cleave to the roof of my mouth. If I prefer not Yerushalayim over my chief joy. Remember, O Yah, the children of Edom, in the day of Jerusalem, who said, raise it, even to the foundation thereof. O daughter of Babylon, who ought to be destroyed. Happy is he that rewardeth thee as thou hast served us. Happy shall he be that taketh and dasheth thy little ones against the stones. What's going on here? Couple of things. Let's first deal with the so-called conscious community and their attack concerning Psalms 137. Oh, you're talking about dashing the babies. Again, that's the same thing Nat Turner did to the white baby slave masters. What are you talking about? When you're dealing in war, you sit there and kill all the males. Ain't that what the white man did to us? If they didn't kill them physically, they killed them economically, socially, politically, spiritually, as the brother Josiah pointed out. And I'm not going to use profanity, but we know what it is. When the black woman has then been said, niggas ain't, he's dead to her. There was a saying going around not too long ago talking about the black woman is the new black man. The black man has been emasculated and dehumanized. So these are things we want to point out. So when the people begin to sit there and take vengeance, like in the case of Nat Turner, like in the case long before him with the prophet Moses, you got to have the slave master's mindset. Talk about killing the little babies. When you sit there and tell black women to get their tubes tied, when you sit there and tell sisters and put Planned Parenthood in the community, and then her welfare check, her WIC check, her food stamps don't sit there and cover the aspect where her job that she sit there and gets doesn't cover the rent. So sisters have to do quote unquote fraud in order to sit there and have the job and still sit there and receive rent payments and then get food stamps and then get incarcerated. But you tell us we're wrong. When we sit there like the brother Nasi Yishmael spoke about vengeance upon the enemies. This ain't Christianity, Israel. This ain't turn the other cheek. This is not turn the other cheek. We want that to be noted. Even when parents slap their children, the child don't turn the other cheek and say, hit me here too. They say, Abba, Ima, please stop. Now, okay, I've been a bad boy. Here, mommy. Here, Abba. Here's the belt. No, you got to be sent as a child to go and get that. So these are things why we want to talk about in this particular case. All right. So once it comes down in this particular aspect, once it comes down in this particular teaching, brothers and sisters, it says what? If I forget thee, O Yerushalayim, let my right hand forget her cunning. If I do not remember thee, let my tongue cleave to the roof of my mouth. It's talking about the aspect of yearning for the land that you had in the past. Land, like the elder spoke about yesterday in Shema Israel. Land. A free people have to have a land. So now, when you get down into verse 7, it says, remember, O Yah, the children of Edom, in a day of Jerusalem, who said, raise it, even to the foundation thereof. So when Edom was there saying, yeah, destroy Jerusalem, yeah, and so forth to so on, the Most High is being asked by the children of Israel, remember that, O Yah, just like Yah commanded Yisrael to not forget Amalek, so did Yisrael in Psalms 137 say, Yah, remember the children of Esau. We don't sit there and pray for our enemies' welfare. We pray to be delivered from our enemies. The Most High said to Solomon, one of the things he liked about Solomon is he did not ask for the lives of his enemies. It doesn't mean that David was wrong when he sat there and said, make my enemies as they make their bowels run like water. That's one of the Psalms of David. I may not sit there and ask you for their life, but I want to be delivered out your hand. We don't sit there and have the concept, pray for those who despitefully use you and persecute you. No, we pray to be delivered from those who despitefully use us and persecute us out of oppression, as the brother Josiah stated. So, getting back into the point of this, Psalms 137 records the aspect of what Esau and Babylon and cahoots did in regards to the children of Israel. Next slide. Thank you, my brother. Obadiah, chapter 1, verse 10 through verse 14. It says this.
For my violence against thy brother Jacob's shame shall cover thee, and thou shalt be cut off forever.
Meaning cut off from the Most High, cut off from societies, cut off from people. And it says what? You will be despised among the nations. Read on in verse 11. Thank you, my brother.
And in the day thou shalt stoodest on the other side, in the day the strangers carried away captives, his forces and his foreigners entered into his gates and cast lots upon Jerusalem, even thou waste as one of them.
When it says they cast lots upon Jerusalem, do you know what that means? I'm going to take my part, that's your part, and then that's your part. So when they say they cast lots upon Jerusalem, it says concerning Esau, the violence done to your brother Jacob, shame shall cover you. You should have not done that, as it goes on to say in verse 12. Read on, my brother, thinks.
But thou shouldest not have looked on the day of thy brother in the day that he became a stranger. Neither shouldest thou have rejoiced over the children of Judah in the day of their destruction. Neither shouldest thou have spoken proudly in the day of their distress.
Yeah, well, Judah's going, they're not really in the land like that. We're gonna get our portion too. They took advantage of the fact that the Most High was against the tribe of Judah for breaking his laws, statutes, and commandments. So they say, now this is going to be our land. We want to sit there and have possession in this particular part. Yep, we're going to sit there and step up in there. Thank you, Babylon. But what did the Most High say? Read on. It says this, going down into verse 13.
Thou shouldest have not entered into the gate of my people in the day of their calamity. Yea, you shouldest not have looked on their affliction in the day of their calamity, nor have laid hands on their substances in the day of their calamity.
I'm going to ask the brother, Josiah, to read that last part when it says, nor have laid. Please read that again.
Nor have laid on their substance in the day of their calamity.
Nor have laid hands on their substance in the day of their calamity. What is that talking about, brothers and sisters? You understand? What is the substance that is of the house of Jacob? Torah, menorah, Mizbeach, the altar, the mikdash, the temple, the holy days, everything, the oracles, the records, the scribes, all of the things, the artifacts. Esau, you should have not laid your hands on their substance. The things that the house of Israel had, like in the time of Josiah, when they found the scrolls of ancient Israel. Eventually, will get their hands on that. No, you should have not touched that. You should have not touched that. That was not for you to touch. Nor have laid hands on their substance in the day of their calamity. When the time that the people of Jerusalem and Judah fell to the Babylonians, Esau, you should have not sat there and been one of them, like, I'm going to sit there and get my portion right here and take that. When you go in the book of Obadiah, chapter 1, verse 1, it says, if thieves come unto thee, if grape gatherers by night, will they not leave some gleaning grapes? Maybe they will, so that way they can cover their tracks. But once it came down to the substance of Israel, Esau tried to take everything. Neither should have thou entered into the gate of my people in the day of their calamity. Yea, thou shouldst not have looked on their affliction in the day of their calamity, when the Most High sent that he was going to send Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar was the king of Babylon, called the servant of the Most High in Jeremiah chapter 25, chapter 26. The Most High said, I will send my servant Nebuchadnezzar to go and do a particular thing. So once it comes down into that particular aspect, and once it comes down into that particular thing, there is no way that Esau had any permission to sit there and do such. You should have just fell back. Neither should have thou had stood in the crossway to cut off those of his that did escape. So when the people were being besieged by the Babylonians, and like later on with the Greeks and the Apocrypha, it said the Israelites ran into any place where they can go for security. Esau, you should have not sat there and cut off those that escaped. Yeah, I'm gonna sit there and join sides with you. Yesterday, when I spoke on this in the congregation, I spoke about a particular matter when there was beef between one guy and some other guys. Beef meaning problems and so forth. They jumped the guy, And there's another person who just happened to come along later on and decided to sit there. He wanted to participate too. When that altercation finished, the next altercation was the guy who beat the holy Maya out the other guy who sat there and just happened to decide to just jump in somebody else's problem. See, know when to fall back. Know when to fall back. That wasn't your problem. There's too many brothers, even today, that done sat there and lost their life was jumping in somebody else's beef, jumping in somebody else's problem. That's what unfortunately happened with the beloved King Josiah, king of Judah. The Egyptians were going to go against the Babylonians, and they decided to sit there and fight against the Egyptians, which was not their beef. That was not their problem. You understand? So these are things we want to point out for edification purposes, brothers and sisters. All right. So now, getting back into this particular regard right here, it says, neither should have thou had stood, all right, in the crossway, meaning the times in which they was able to get out through the crossways, the this way, the highway, the this and the that, escaping or egress and so forth and so on. Edom was there like, I got you, I got you, I got you. Should have never did that. That blood, even though the Most High was angry with Judah, will still be atoned for by what? It says Esau shall be destroyed to the last man. So when you have the concept that many people unfortunately teach about the Edomites themselves being all the white people of the earth today, the so-called Europeans as they're called, we got a problem with that. Because, and it's not to sound disrespectful, but if you're talking geographically, one aspect. If you're talking politically, that's another aspect. If you want to say politically, okay, our enemies with Edom, our enemies today is such and such, that's one thing. But if you try to sit there and say linearly that the white man, woman, and child come from the Hebrew Abraham, that is a problem. Okay, so these are things we want to point out for edification purposes. All right, so let's go on to the next slide. All right, thank you, my brother. Ashur ad Babel, Jeremiah chapter 40, and I'll read this. It says, now when all the captains of the forces which were in the fields, even they and their men, heard that the king of Babylon had made Gedaliah, the son of Achiquam, governor in the land, and had committed unto him men and women and children, and of the poor of the land, of them that were not carried away captive to Babylon. Then they came to Gedaliah to Mizpeh, even Yishmael, the son of Netaniah, and Yochanan, and Jehonatan, the sons of Quariah, and Sariah, the son of Tankumet, and the sons of Ephai, the Netophatite, Salakli, and Yaazniah, the son of a Maakathite, they and their men. Yazaniah, as you see there in verse 8, Jeremiah chapter 40, verse 8. All right, let's remember that name, please. It goes on to say, and Gedaliah, the son of Achikam, the son of Shaphan, swore unto them and to their men, saying, fear not to serve the Chaldeans, dwell in their land and serve the king of Babylon, and it will be well with you. As for me, behold, I will dwell at Mizpah to serve the Chaldeans, which will come unto us. But ye gather ye wine and summer fruits and oil, and put them in your vessels, and dwell in your cities that ye have taken. Likewise, when all the Jews, that is to say the house of Judah, the Israelites, in verse 11, that were in Moab, and among the Ammonites, and in Edom, and that were in all the countries, heard that the king of Babylon had left the remnant of Judah, and that he had set them over them, Gedaliah, the son of Achiquam, the son of Shaphan, even all the Jews, that is to say the Israelites of the tribe of Judah, okay, returned out of all their places, whether they were driven, and came to the land of Judah, to Gedaliah, unto Mizpah, and gathered wine and summer fruits very much. The point in this is this, brothers and sisters, is this. The Israelites, all right, after the Babylonians besieged the land, they set up for the remains of the people that were still in the land, Gedaliah as a lieutenant or a governor and so forth. So you had Israelites in Babylon at that time. You had Israelites still in the land of Israel, in Jerusalem, and in other cities of Judah, like Mizpah which was actually in the land of Benjamin at that particular time. Then you have it to where Jerusalem too is actually in the land of Benjamin. But if you read Joshua chapter 15 and 16. But getting back into the point, you also had Israelites in the time of Jeremiah, also in the land of Egypt. So you had Israelites in Egypt, Israelites in the land of Israel, and Israelites in Babylon. See the dispersion that the Most High said, the beginning of scattering from one end of the earth to the other, because you brought in the idols that Solomon worshiped. You brought in the idols that the king Ahab had, that the king of Israel had, that you read of in the book of Micah, when it said the statues of Omri are kept. So you had Omri and his idols, Ahab and his idols, Jehu and his idols. The divided monarchy in the northern kingdom had 20 kings of the northern tribes of Israel, and all of them were wicked. All the kings of the northern tribes were wicked, from Jeroboam to Nadab to Baasha to Elah to Zimri to Timni to Omri. All of them were wicked. All of the kings of the northern, all 20 of them were wicked. All right, so these are things we want to point out. And of the kings of Judah, after Solomon being 20 also in number, there was only noted 6 to be righteous. So you had, after the death of Solomon in the southern kingdom, you had 14 wicked kings, and of the northern kingdom, no righteous kings. So now when you see Babylon coming along, don't wonder why. When you see the Assyrians coming, don't wonder why. The Most High stated in Isaiah 10, I sent the Assyrians against an ungodly people. It says in the book of Amos, the people that pant after the poor for a pair of shoes. The elder prince of poor read yesterday, you don't take the person whose poor is garment to pledge, for wherein shall he sleep? Ancient Israel did that. It speaks in the book of Ezekiel about men who dealt with women on their menstrual, on their uncleanness sexually. It talks about ancient Israel dealing in the book of Amos when it says a father and his son going to the same maid, aka today running a train on her, father and son. The Most High said, you profane my name in that. There are certain things you just don't do. So now when you begin to see the kinds of wickedness that ancient Israel was into, you can see why the kingdom fell. Wickedness will bring you down, brothers and sisters. There's no new rules to the game. You have never been able to sit there and dealt wickedly and crook and be okay. There's people who change their ways, like King Manasseh, and then put back on the throne. But there's no way for you to stay in your wickedness and everything gonna be all right. No. So these are things we just want to point out for edification purposes. All right. So once it comes down to this, it says what? Likewise, when all the Jews, that's of the Israelites, verse 11 is important, that were in Moab and among the Ammonites and in Edom. So you had Israelites scattered among Moab, and you had Israelites scattered among the Ammonites, and Israelites scattered in Edom. Now, I'm going to ask the brother to go into, if you give me the book, no problem. We're going to go, I'll read it, in Jeremiah chapter 49. All right? So we can gain some understanding of what we're talking about. All right? And here's the point in that particular regard. All right? And it says this. Jeremiah chapter 49, verse 7. Thus saith the Most High of hosts, is wisdom no more in Teman? Is counsel perished from the prudent? Is their wisdom vanished? Flee ye, turn back, dwell deep, O inhabitants of Dedan. For I do bring the calamity of Esau upon him, the time that I will punish him. If grape gatherers come to thee, will they not leave some gleaning grapes? If thieves by night, will they not destroy till they have had enough? But I have made Esau bare, and I have uncovered his secret places, and I have not, and he shall not be able to hide himself. His seed is spoiled, and his brethren and his neighbors, and he is not. Leave thy fatherless children, I will rear them, and let thy widows trust in me. So it goes on to say, for thus saith Yah, behold, they to whom it pertaineth not to drink of the cup shall assuredly drink, and art thou he that shall altogether go unpunished? Thou shalt not go unpunished, but thou shalt surely drink. For I have sworn by myself, saith Yah, that Bozrah shall become an astonishment, a reproach, a waste, and a curse, and all the cities thereof shall be perpetual waste. I have heard a message from Yah, an ambassador is sent among the nations. Gather yourselves together and come against her and rise up to her in battle. For behold, I will make thee small among the nations and despised among men. Thy terribleness have deceived thee, even the pride of thy heart. O thou dwellest in the cleft of the rock, that stronghold of the nest of the hill. Though thou should make thy nest as high as the eagle, I will bring thee down from thence, saith the Most High. And Edom shall become an astonishment. Everyone that passeth by it shall be astonished and shall hiss at all the plagues thereof, as the overthrow of Sodom and Gomorrah, and the neighbor cities thereof, saith Yah. No man shall abide there, neither shall any of the son of men dwell therein. Behold, he shall come up like a thicket, like a lion from the thickets of the Jordan, against the strong habitation, and I will suddenly make him run away from it. And whoso is chosen, him will I appoint over it. And who is like me, and who shall appoint me a time? And who is the shepherd that should stand before me? Therefore, hear ye the counsel of Yah, that he have taken against Edom, and his purposes that he have proposed against the inhabitants of Teman. Surely the least of the flock shall drag them away. Surely their habitation shall be appalled. The earth quaketh at the noise of their fall. There is a cry, a noise whereof is heard in the Red Sea. Behold, he shall come up like a swoop down as a vulture, and spread his wings against Bozrah. And the heart of the mighty men of Edom at that day shall be as the heart of a woman in her pains. So when they read in Jeremiah chapter 49 about the destruction of the house of Esau, in that particular regard, that's just what we want to point out for edification purposes, brothers and sisters. It talks about their fall and their destruction. The book of Obadiah states the reason why. What happened in Jeremiah 40, brothers and sisters, is the Israelites that were in there, when they found out basically that Israel was still in the land after the Babylonians besieged the temple and destroyed it. We're talking 597 and then later on 586 BCE. The Israelites wound up going back into the land to a great extent. That becomes important when you speak about the diaspora of Israel. All right, so let's not, then it's his. The Assyrian matter and the Israelites. What you're looking at on the left-hand side is musicians that the Israelites were pictured as inside the land of Assyria, going into the Assyrian captivity. All right, now, brothers and sisters, the men there had cornrows. That's what it looks like to me, and a very well set in beard. Now, we see the complexion. That's what it is. Then when you look at the other particular aspect on the right-hand side, see, that's where the land of the Assyria had rule in that particular regard, which also included where the Edomites were at. From the 9th to the 7th century BCE, the Israelites was also engulfed in that. This is why you see later on Jehu, king of Israel, bowed down to Shalmaneser III inside of artifacts. He also is pictured with cornrows. Okay, so we're going to go on to the next slide, and it says this: the Assyrian matter and the Israelites. The Assyrians spoke of Ahaz of Judah, Hezekiah of Judah, Manasseh of Judah, Menahem of Israel, Pekah of Israel, Hosea of Israel. I'm going to ask the brother to go to 2 Kings chapter 17, verse 4, so we can gain some understanding about this. Now, if you look, brothers and sisters, and remember this part right here in Jeremiah 40, when it speaks about the diaspora of Israel after Babylon done besieged, you had Gedaliah, all right, in the land of Benjamin in a city called Mizpah. And it also speaks about the other aspects of the leaders at that particular time. It said the Israelites, aka Judah, unfortunately transliterated as Jews, which is Yehudim, which would be Judites, or those that were of the southern kingdom of the house of Judah, okay? It said they went back into the land, while the other Israelites were unfortunately in the land of Chaldea. All right, while we already went over in previous teachings, such as, and I recommend this video on this channel called From Avaris to Alabama, because we went over the Elephantine matter of the Israelites in Elephantine Island in the land of southern Egypt, north of Sudan in Africa. So this is what we want to talk about. The diaspora of Israel, to a great extent, is only at that particular era within the continents known as Africa and Asia. The Israelites did not go to England and become Jewish. The Israelites fled into African and other Asian places. This becomes important. Now, when we look at this particular aspect right here, why did I say that knowing that becomes important for the diaspora before I went to that slide? Is because the Assyrian kings mention King Ahaz, King Hezekiah, and King Manasseh. Menahem of Israel, Pekah of Israel, and Hosea of Israel. So I'm going to ask the brother to go to 2 Kings 17, verse 4, so we can gain some understanding of what we're talking about in this particular regard. All right? Thank you, my brother.
Hallelujah. And the king of Assyria found conspiracy in Hosea, for he had sent messages to So king of Egypt, and offered no present to the king of Assyria, as he had done year by year. Therefore the king of Assyria shut him up and bound him and in prison.
So when you're looking at this, brothers and sisters, all right, you had it to where the Assyrians were ruling in the era that we see in 2 Kings 17. So when we go back over here, and it said from the 9th to the 7th century BCE, that is to say the 7th century BCE is 600 something BCE. 700 something BCE is the 8th century BCE. This becomes important because people of the northern tribes of Israel taken into the Assyrian captivity, as well as later on in 701 BCE with the people of Lachish and taking the people of Judah to the Assyrian captivity, as we went over before, brothers and sisters. That becomes important because what we just read in the book, brothers and sisters, of 2 Kings 17:4 is inclusive of the date that we see right here, where it says the 9th to the 7th century. So in 721, 722 BCE is the time we see in the book of 2 Kings 17. So when it says So, the king of Egypt, he is talking about the Hebrew aspect of either one or two people of the Egyptian monarchy. That is either a Sarkhan of Dynasty 24 or Shabaka of Dynasty 25. But because the Egyptian chronology and what they call the third intermediate period is kind of flip-flop and sloppy and so forth and so on, it's kind of hard reading the Hebrew record to try to ascertain which Egyptian king is talking about. That's one thing to point out. Regardless of that point, brothers and sisters, it's talking about Dynasty 24 or Dynasty 25 of the ancient Egyptian aspect. Now, when you look at ancient Israel, it says, So king of Egypt, Hosea, decided to ask the Egyptians to join with them to go against the Assyrians. And he sent no present to the king of Assyria as he had done year by year. Year by year, you know what we call it now? Filing your taxes. That's sending them the present. Filing your taxes every year ain't nothing, brothers and sisters, but just giving the government a receipt of what you did all year long. You are a captive. Don't file your taxes and see what happened. Or worse, they'll garnish your check. Or worse, wind up doing over a year in jail. They will put you in incarceration. Like it says, he bound him up and cast him in prison in 2 Kings 17:4. It's the same thing going on now because you didn't send your present every year. You don't sit there and fill out what they call the 1040 easy and so forth and so on with the taxes. See what happens after a while. They'll garnish it. And if it gets too bad, in their eyes too bad, they'll lock you up. What they call tax evasion. This is a captive aspect. Is nothing new under the sun. So, the Assyrians spoke about the ancient kings of Israel and some of the ancient kings of Judah. That's only important, not for us as Israel, but for those who want to deny that ancient Israel was around. How you have a nation like the Assyrians speaking about, yes, we defeated the Israelites. You read about Menahem, the king of Israel, inside the record of Tiglath-Pileser III of Assyria, who ruled from 745 to 727 BCE. So when you read about Menahem in the aspect of 2 Kings chapter 15, it says he took silver from the Israelites to give it as a present to the king of Assyria. You basically paying them so they won't come and lock you up and beat you up. Now, if you happen to be, unfortunately, what they call either parole or so forth, you have to sit there and pay those people so that way you won't sit there or you're out on bail, as it's called, or something, one of those things, bail, parole, one of something like that. You have to pay the government, that is to say their penal system, aka the police department, and if you stop paying, they'll sit there and come and lock you back up. You still on some kind of house arrest. I knew a brother in New York who could not travel to the state of Connecticut or Vermont because he was still entwined inside of a captive place called New York. Or some brothers out of state who can't travel to New York because of X, Y, and Z crimes. It's the same point in premise. They put you in a barricade. It's no different than they sit there and use the woman against the man and a man against the woman. They call it child support, and don't pay it, you go to jail. There are cases when the man wanted to pay more child support and couldn't legally, because she already took him to court. So if he was legally obligated by the court to pay only $300, if he wanted to pay $400, he couldn't do it through the bank. He couldn't do it through that. He would have to sit there and give her $100 bill or 250s or 1010s or 520s. But he could not have it on register through the system told our brother by saying that he gave her more than what the government allowed. There was a black man, a brother, that went to jail, brothers and sisters, because he gave too much child support. Did you hear what I just said? The man got locked up for 6 months, brother, because he gave too much child support. Because ask that?
How do you give too much child support?
It's the same way of being conquered. When you have somebody else telling you what to do for your children, and you go and step outside of the realm of the oppressor, you really going to see what that oppression is. And then there were sisters who sat there and was upset with their baby's daddy and was like, I'm going to sit there and take you for child support. Meanwhile, the man already has documentation via check, via bank statement, via what have you, by saying that he's been giving the woman, I'm just giving a figure, $300 every month or every week in certain cases. There were cases in which the man did not pay off the record, not being made by the court, but just him having his stubs, by him having his bank statements and where the money trail led to from his account to her account, or a money order from a post office where you can trace it, or a tracking number where you can trace it. In that particular regard, there were mothers upset with the child of their father going into the system when they was dealing outside of the system, just dealing with their own, still legally, not dealing drugs to send her that money to her, but more so he having a warehouse job, he's a driver, he's a this or a that, and he's just saying, here, this is for the son or daughter, or son and daughter, or daughter or son. This is for me, from me to you, ain't got to go to court. She's upset with him because he didn't come through on his own initiative one time, went to court, and the court said he been paying too much. Lady, you now get $150. Did you hear what I just said? I want this to be noted, what happens with oppression. There were sisters upset with the father of her children to where she sat there and said, yes, he was paying, given a figure, $300. Well, we in our records see that he doesn't even have to pay that. He now pays $150. See what happens when you trust the oppressor? These are things we want to talk about, because see, when they go into that, correct me if I'm wrong, there's the gross and then there's the net. They sit there and look at it through the gross. That is to say, if your gross amount makes brothers and sisters $800, after taxes is the net. Then they take it out from their consequences. So your net is already taken out from what was more than before. That's called oppression. Talk about for edification purposes. All right. So just as Hosea in 2 Kings 17:4 didn't give his present to Tiglath-Pileser, so is it with our people now. We don't fill out the W-2 form and send it back in through the taxes through H&R Block and other cases. Ain't nothing new under the sun. So these are things we want to point out, brothers and sisters. All right. So getting back into this particular aspect, brothers and sisters, in this regard, let's go into the next slide. All right. It says this, Ezekiel chapter 35 and Ezekiel chapter 36. Moreover, the word of Yah came to me saying, Son of man, set thy face against Mount Seir and prophesy against it, and say unto it, Thus saith the Lord God, Behold, O Mount Seir, I am against thee, and I will stretch out my hand against thee, and I will make thee most desolate. I will lay thy cities waste, and thou shalt be a desolate. Thou shalt be desolate, and thou shalt know that I am Yah, because thou hast had a perpetual hatred, and hast shed the blood of the children of Israel by the force of the sword, in the time of their calamity, and the time of their iniquity had an end. What is that saying in verse 5? When it says the iniquity had an end. When you go to Ezekiel chapter 7, and it says an end is proclaimed to the bloody city, toward Jerusalem, for she shall be visited from the Most High for her iniquities. Brothers and sisters, Edom should have never participated in the downfall of Judah. Nobody asked you to participate in whooping Judah's behind. When Judah caught a beat down by the Babylonians and the Chaldeans, Edom should have never been involved in that. You should have just fell back. But what you did, it says this: thou hast had a perpetual hatred, and hast shed the blood of the children of Israel by the force of the sword in the time of their calamity. Obadiah, collaborating that, says you should have not cut off those that escaped. So when they were running out, you actually committing murder. Nobody asked you to sit there and deal with them in that matter. Did you know, brothers and sisters, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, was not charged, nor his servant Nebuzaradan was charged with murdering by the Most High? The Babylonian Nebuchadnezzar and Nebuchadnezzar's servant, which was Nebuzaradan. Brothers and sisters, the Most High didn't charge them with murder in the record. Edom, participating with Babylon, was charged with murder. Nobody asked you to sit there and shed blood. The blood that was supposed to have been shed due to Judah's iniquity for shedding their own blood will be by the hands of Babylon, not Esau. This is not the feast that you was invited to. Mind your business. But because you did this, here's what it says: therefore, Yah, I will prepare, and blood shall pursue thee, since thou hast not hated blood, even blood shall pursue you, and not be like, yo, that's still my brother. I know Judah was in some stuff, man. We talking from Molech and childbirth sacrifice to homosexuality in the time of King Manasseh. We're talking about the aspect of all kinds of wickedness that was being promoted and done. When you seen your brother fall, you wasn't supposed to sit there and say, yeah, raise it to the ground. And old dog, after the guy stomped the guy, and then you go with the kick. No, that's what Edom did, to give an example in the movie realm. If you watch Menace to Society, when the guy K or KD, whatever he was called, right? Kane, correct. Thank you, my brother. When he and the other guy had an altercation, and he had stomped the guy and everything, and then the guy, old dog, later on came and kicked him again. That's Esau. Esau was the guy who came and kicked him. No, you kicked him when he's down. That's a punk move. You understand? What are you doing? So these are things to be pointed out for edification purposes. Nobody invited you to the fall of the tribe of Judah's festivities. Mind your business. Not minding your business can cause a lot of problems. Your life and the life of those who come from you, because the things you do affect your children. All right, so we're going to go on to the next slide. Ezekiel chapter 36. And I highlighted some of the points in there for a reason, all right? Son of man, prophesy unto the mountains of Israel and say, ye mountains of Israel, hear the word of Yah. Thus saith the Lord God, because the enemy has said against you, aha, even the ancient high places are ours in possession. We got Jerusalem, baby. It's all good. Therefore, prophesy and say, thus saith the Lord God, because they have made you, the land, desolate, and swallowed you up on every side, that ye might be a possession unto the residue of the heathen. And you are taken up in the lips of talkers, and are in infamy of the people. Therefore, ye mount of Israel, hear ye of Yah. Thus saith the rivers and valleys, into the desolate wastes, into the cities that are forsaken, which became a prey and a derision to the residue of the heathen that are round about. Therefore, thus saith the Lord God, surely a fire of my jealousy have I spoken against the residue of the heathen, and against all Idumea, which have appointed my land unto their possession with the joy of all their heart, with despiteful minds, and to cast it out for a prey. Prophesy, therefore, concerning the land of Israel, and say unto the mountains, and to the hills, and to the rivers, and to the valleys, thus saith the Lord God, behold, spoken in my the shame of the heathen, meaning the land born to shame. All right, born meaning carried. Therefore, thus saith the Lord God, I have lifted up my hand, surely the heathen that are round about you, they shall bear their shame. So what are we reading, brothers and sisters, in this particular regard is this. When you go right here in Ezekiel chapter 36, right? And it says, all of Idumea. Idumea is Edom. All right, so we can gain some understanding of what we're talking about. All right, Idumea is Edom. So this is something we want to point out. So the land of Israel was taken up, as it says in verse 3, right, into the lips of talkers. The talkers are all the different nations that said they cast lots upon the land. This would be mine. You want to talk to this neighbor? We're going to, oh, the ancient high places is given to us for habitation. The land of Israel, the land in the east, oh, that's ours. This is why we don't teach, brothers and sisters, that the land of Israel is in the Western Hemisphere. Because that book, no offense intended to any author or any scholar, once it comes down to the guy who wrote the book, When Rocks Cry Out, trying to say basically that the land of Israel and all the eastern lands are truly here in the West, that's something being promoted to us laying claim to be in the house of Israel in the land of the East. See, the authors doesn't attack Jewish people in the land of the East, saying that y'all inside of the fake land of Israel. They only come to the black people saying they're Israel with that argument because they're working for them so they can maintain the land for themselves under the quote-unquote scholarship. See, the word of the Most High supersedes any scholar. This is something we want to point out for evidence purposes. I say that as an author of 3 books. The word of the Most High, the book of Ezekiel, is more important than Egypt talking writing. The book of Ezekiel is more important than Deuteronomy 28:15-68 that I wrote. The book of Ezekiel certainly is more important than the New Testament and certainly more important than the book that I wrote concerning it. The word, see, Yah didn't say, Yeshaya, write this book. The word didn't come expressly to Moreh Yeshaya like it came to Ezekiel the prophet. You understand? So when we dealing with this, I cannot write in any book and say, Yah said it unto me. I can't say that. I'll be lying. I can't say that. I can sit there and quote history, prophets, archaeology, linguistics, Torah, but outside of that, they no word come expressly to me like it says Yah spoke a whisper into the ear of Samuel. That didn't happen to me concerning these writings. So once it comes down in this particular regard, it says this, therefore, thus saith the Lord God, surely in the fire of my jealousy have I spoken against the residue of the heathen. You know why I highlighted that part in verse 5 is because Idumea is Edom, which have appointed my land, meaning the land of Israel, into their possession. So the land of Israel was taken up in the lips of talkers. The residue of the nations that were around them were the Ishmaelites, were the Edomites, the Ammonites, were the actual Edomites themselves. So these are the different nations that was around after Israel lost their habitation to dwell in. Next slide, please. Thank you. The traveling of the Edomites in part. Now, let's look at, brothers and sisters, at the right-hand side where it says Edom, right? That's in the time of Isaiah. Then, when you're looking at the left-hand side, when it says Kingdom of Edom, he's all west with that, and the green part there on the left side, like that. Or should I even sit there and go as far as the Medes and the Persian era on the left-hand side? You begin to sit there and see Edom right directly south of Judah, as opposed to them being over on the other side earlier in the book of Joshua, where the Edomites was over on there. So the slide that you see there on the left-hand side is later on in history, but prior to that, on the right-hand side, Edom in Isaiah's time. But you still see them trying to fit in and merge in that particular regard. So, right, slowly but surely. Thank you, my brother. So when we go back here and it says they taking my land in their possession, you begin to see and look right here like, whoa, south of Jerusalem, you still going to Beersheba. So they always wanted to sit there and just nudge their way up in that land like that. This is what we want to show scripturally and then through a map. All right. Next slide. Thank you, my brother. It says First Maccabees 4 and 5 and secular sources. Left side says this. And they set up there a garrison and fortified Betsura to preserve it, that the people might have a defense against Idumea. Remember, we were saying that Idumea is Edom. All right. So this is something we want to point out for edification purposes. This is the Greek terminology in regards to the children of Esau. Okay, so that's something to be noted. So the Greeks, we already know, were white people. So one of the things to point out is if the white man, aka in part the Greeks, had a name for Esau, Edom, then how can all Edom be the white man? This is something we want to point out for reason and purposes. Now, getting back into this particular regard here, it says in First Maccabees chapter 4, the last verse of it says this, and they set there a garrison to keep it. Now, they are the Maccabees, right? It says, and fortified Betsura. Betsura battle or battle of Betzur happened in 165 BCE, which commenced the aspect of celebration of Hanukkah to preserve it. And the people have a defense against Idumea, the best defense against Edom, because as we already know from Ezekiel, Edom always wanted that land. Now, First Maccabees 5 says this. Now, when the nations round about heard that after that the altar was built, and the sanctuary renewed as before, it displeased them very much. When the nations round about heard that. Let's go back, brothers and sisters, into Ezekiel 36, verse 4. Therefore, ye mountains of Israel, hear the word of the Lord God. Thus saith the Lord God to the mountains, to the hills, and to the rivers, and to the valleys, and to the desolate wastes, and to the cities that are forsaken, which became a prey and derision to the residue of the heathen that are round about. The land was forsaken of mainly the house of Israel. So now when we see the remnants of Israel still in the land, it says what? And they set there First Maccabees 5:1. Now, when the nations round about, see, heathen nations round about, still terminologies, heard that the altar was built and the sanctuary renewed as before, it displeased them very well. They never wanted Israel to serve Yod Hey Wah Hey. We're going to get into that in a second. Wherefore, they thought to destroy this generation of Jacob that was among them. And thereupon, they began to slay and destroy the people. Then Judas fought against the children of Esau in Idumea at Arabatim, because they besieged Gael. And he gave them a great overthrow and abated their courage and took their spoils. Brothers and sisters, the Israelites always had, in layman terms, beef with the Edomites. This is something we want to point out for edification purposes. Now it says here in secular sources, mind you, the book of Maccabees we're talking about there is the 2nd century BCE. From the time of Jeremiah, we see in the Lachish letters that Israel was told to be aware lest Edom should come to the land. That comes from a book called The Bible is History by Ian Wilson. In that book, you can get online. It's called The Bible is History by Ian Wilson. He spoke about the Lachish letters, and part of it says in translation, what? Be aware, at least Edom should come to the land. So from the era of Jeremiah, and we're talking Jeremiah was in the 6th century BCE. Then we're talking later on with the Maccabees in the 2nd century BCE. Edom always wanted to be in that land. Now, Chauvel, who wrote a book called Biblical Archaeology and Focus, says the following. By the 4th century BC, meaning BCE, the traditional Edomite territory south of the water of a semi-nomadic Arab people. So what is this going on here? The Edomites were already in cahoots and being with the Nabateans. The Nabateans were the people, brothers and sisters, of the Ishmaelites through his son Nebaioth. Nebaioth is the ancestor of the Nabateans, and his father was Ishmael. So these are things we just want to point out for edification purposes. It says we should be in mind of this, and that is the Romans and the Edomites were friends. the Edomites and the Nabateans were friends. According to historians, the guy Herod, son of Antipater, was an Idumean, and he was friends with the Romans. All right? So this is something we want to point out for edification purposes. Now, John Hyrcanus, all right? This is coming from the book of Josephus, and he ruled from 134 to 104 BCE. John Hyrcanus and the Edomites. Hyrcanus took also Dora and Marisa, cities of Idumea, and subdued all the Idumeans, and permitted them to stay in that country, and make use of the laws of the Jews, meaning the Israelites. And they were so desirous of living their forefathers that they submit to the use and ways of living. At which time, therefore, this befell them, that they were hereafter no other than Jews. So, in other words, the guy, John Hyrcanus, which is the nephew of Judas Maccabeus, all right, he was the person that was responsible. So the next, so one of the things we want to point out, my brothers and sisters, is this. It says, at which time thereafter this befell them, meaning that they actually became under the customs of the Israelites, that they were hereafter no other than Jews. So this is why later on in history, certainly when you get to the first century of BCE, and then later on in the first century AD, you got to sit there and understand the difference between Israel Jew and other nation Jew. And when you read in history, you got to understand whether or not it's the true house of Israel or the converts that became, such as the Edomites, converting to the ways of the house of Israel. John Hyrcanus, as stated, is the nephew of Judas Maccabeus. So this is something we want to point out for edification purposes. All right? Josephus' matter regarding Moses. It says this. After this, God bid Moses to put his right hand into his bosom. He obeyed. And when he took it out, it was white and in color like to chalk. But afterward, it returned to its wonted color again. Josephus, Antiquities of the Jews, Book 2, Chapter 12. During Europus, 4th century BCE. What you're looking at over here is Israelites that was in the land of Aram or Syria. In the 4th century BCE, they had a camp, if you want to call it that, referred to later on in history as Dura Europus. The Israelites made this painting of Moses and Aaron in the Exodus. This is the way the Israelites pictured Moses and Aaron in the Exodus and what they call the Dura Europus. The guy that's closer to the screen, he has an afro. He's about between the complexion of me and the brother Josiah. This is pictured in Dura Europus long before Michelangelo was paid by the Vatican to make white pictures of the prophet Zechariah. Long before First Maccabees, chapter 3, verse 48, says that the heathen has sought to put pictures and likenesses of themselves inside the records of the Israelites. All the white lily-looking pictures that you see of the biblical characters were all made by orders of the Vatican. This is what we want to point out. From Michelangelo on down. You understand? So they knew good and well later on that people would not know how to read English. Hebrew became, to a certain extent, an unknown language by many. So when you're looking at this particular aspect, brothers and sisters, you see both the victors and the oppressed, that is to say the Egyptians in the sea, all being people of color. We already shown earlier the aspect of the Assyrians and how they pictured the Israelites. This is, you can look this up online, do a Europus in the Exodus, and go even in Google Images and you see this. Brothers and sisters, Israel was not a white house. This is not to sound racial, but it will be just as important if I were to sit there and point out that Cleopatra was not a black woman. Cleopatra was not a Nubian black queen. Cleopatra was a Ptolemy queen set up there by the Ptolemy people when the white people who were Ptolemies ruled Egypt. Cleopatra was not a black woman. Moses was not a white man. Of course, the generations being centuries between two of them in regard to that. So this is something we want to point out for reason and purposes. Aaron and Moses pictured in the Dua Europus with the Exodus. The priests of the house of Israel were told that if they were to see a white rising in the skin of one's flesh and the hair thereof be turned yellow, in Leviticus chapter 13, verse 29 and 30, the yellow is blonde in Hebrew, called zohab. If the se'ar, which is hair, is zohab, is blonde, that person has the plague of leprosy and shall be put out. Blonde hair was not the custom of Israel. It was part of the nega mazora, the plague of leprosy. In Leviticus chapter 13, verse 29 to 30. This is why scholars, though they like the Bible, don't like the Bible. Because when you go and study meticulous and get your sources together, then you begin to see certain things. Next slide. The Edom and Japhet matter. All right, so we can gain some understanding of what we're talking about. It says the second successor to Augustus was Caligula, and he was the Roman friend to the Edomite Agrippa. The same Agrippa was friends to the Roman Claudius. Claudius ruled from 41 to 51 AD. The Agrippa was friends with Claudius, was the grandson of Herod, the son of Antipater. Claudius gave Herod II land today currently called Lebanon. Next after the pervert Nero is Vespasian, who was sent to go and attack the Israelites in the middle of the 1st century AD. The general Vespasian conquered Jotapata, Gamala, Jericho, Samaria, Tarchea, Gishala, and when he left to debate with Vatillans after Nero died, he left his son Titus to besiege Jerusalem. If one is following, we see the importance of the connection with Edom and the Nabateans. The Roman Vespasian was friends with Agrippa of Edom, of Nabatea. It should be noted, Nabateans are the children of Ishmael's son Nebaot. Now, these are things, now on this same channel, you can go to the aspect called the Israelites, and this kind of goes into this in that regard too. So some of the information actually then is kind of redundant, but the timeline, when I put this PowerPoint together with the references, some of the information may seem redundant, but it's for edification purposes. All right, so it says this. If one is following, we see the importance of the connection with Edom and the Nabateans. That becomes very, very important for, as stated, edification purposes, brothers and sisters. All right? And here is what we read in this particular regard. Going on to the next slide. Thank you. I just wanted to give a timeline with the Herod and so forth. The Edom and Japhet matter. Edom, which is Antipater, the Edomite, plus Julius Caesar, which was a Roman, were friends. Edom, Herod, was an Edomite, all right? And Julius Caesar, who was a white man, were friends. Then we have, all right, with Augustus, who was a Roman. This is also known as Octavian. They were friends. That Rome was quite ignorant of the biblical ways, and thus it had to be Edom to tell Rome about the Hebrew culture. The Edomites were called the Idumeans by the Romans. All right, so this is something we want to point out for edification purposes. Once it comes down to this particular case, and once it comes down to this particular regard, is this. Antipater is the father of Herod, and he was friends with Julius Caesar. Antipater's son, both of them being Edomites, were friends with the Roman Julius Caesar. Edom, who and represented by Herod, only being one person in that regard, but the leader of the people was friends with the Roman leader Augustus. So the Romans and the Edomites were friends. They had a Hebron. They had a Hebron. They had a Hebron. They had a friendship. All right, so this is what we want to point out. The Edom and Japhet matter. One more time. Edom, Agrippa, plus Vespasian were friends. Edom, let's say Agrippa, plus Vespasian were friends. Edom and Melchus of Ishmael, plus Vespasian were friends. What are we saying, brothers and sisters, is this. All right? Grant, which is Michael Grant, a college scholar in certain cases, in his book, The History of Ancient Israel, speaks on the fact that anyone of the seed of David. Why do I emphasize that author when he said the seed of David? Because, oh, it's spiritual Israel. Why would you want the spirit of the people who said, Yah, Shalom? It's been real, Yah. Thank you for bringing us out of Egypt. Shalom. Why would you even want that spirit of Israel? The truth is, Israel needs a new spirit. That's what it says in Ezekiel, make you a new heart. The Israelites were told to get a new spirit in Ezekiel chapter 33. So why would you want the spirit of the people that went against the Most High God? So when they talk about among the Jehovah's Witnesses and so forth, spiritual Israel, because the real Israel's gone. And then you have, no offense intended, Jesus Christ, who is the Son, when the Most High said Israel's his son. So it is referred to as replacement theology, quote unquote, the church takes over the sanctuary. Look that up on Google. Replacement theology, if you will. And then one of the things that they portray is to Yah, Lord and Savior, they now said is Jesus Christ. Titles that belong to Israelites, just as the Son, the prophet, the priest, and king, were then applied to him, and then he was killed. So now Israel's no more. This is the concept when people start talking about the aspect of, well, and that's why that argument between quote-unquote non-messianics and quote-unquote messianics will always be in Israel, because we're not going to stop saying that we're the son of the Father, and that's why we call him Father, because we are his son. Okay, now, getting back to this, it says that you had it to where Agrippa, who were descendants of Herod, all right, as well as Herod II, were friends with the Edomites, be it prior to this, here with Julius Caesar, and then after Julius Caesar, you eventually get into his nephew Octavian, aka Augustus, all right? Then after that, he becomes the Roman emperor in 27 BCE. All right, so this is something we want to point out for edification purposes. We went over that in the Roman and the Israelites part 1 and part 2. That's on this channel as well. Subscribe to the channel, please. All right, it says this as well. Edom, Agrippa, Vespasian, Edom, Agrippa, Vespasian, friends and friends. Edom and Melchus of Ishmael plus Vespasian, friends. Edom and Ishmael, friends with the Romans, all against the house of Israel. Then we go on to the college reference book, The History of Ancient Israel, all right, speaks on the fact, saying, in quote, anyone of the seed of David was hunted down and killed. Hasmonean people were not Edom. The Hasmonean people later on were the descendants of the Maccabees. All right, so these are things we want to point out for edification purposes. Shalom. Now, going on to the next slide. We want to sit there and go historically in this particular regard. The matter of Edom and the matter of the POZ. Now, Principal Paul yesterday in the congregation spoke about Zionism is really no different than the KKK. Okay, now let's look at this right here. POZ stands for the Protocols of Zion. So we'll see what Edom was about concerning this kind of matter. This right here is taken from the Protocols of Zion and what the ancient people who, as Josephus called, the Idumeans later on became known as Jews. They started dealing in Japhet with Greece in 429 BCE, in Rome in 69 BCE, in Madrid, which is in Spain, in 1552 AD. So don't tell me the Jewish man was not part of the slave trade. Let's go on. In Paris in 1790 AD, in London in 1814 AD, in Berlin in 1871 AD, in St. Petersburg, which is in Russia, in 1881 AD, the aspect of how Edom went around as Jews. So these are something we want to point out for edification purposes. So when you read in Jeremiah, when it says, I have revealed your secret places, ain't too hard to figure out to a certain extent what it's talking about, because they always went around in secrecy and trying to sit there and act like they were something that they were not. Now, one of the other things to point out regarding that is this. Greece, 429, Pericles era. Rome, 69, Augustus era, or a little before Augustus, that's to say the era with Julius Caesar. Madrid, 1552, the era of Charles V. Paris, 1790, not too far from the aspect of Napoleon. London, 1814, in regards to what happened with the Rome, with the London and people in England with Jewish people. In Berlin, in 1871, study about the origins of what happened in 1870, which led to World War I. All right. In St. Petersburg, during the aspect of what happened in the 1880s, they masquerade around acting as such. This right here gets into what is called the Protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion, Zionism, if you will, by Theodor Herzl, if you will, later on in the 1890s, that wanted to sit there and say the land of Israel could be given to them. Remember, Ezekiel said, for Idumea into the residue of the heathen. So it's not only Edomites that wanted the land, it was the other peoples as well. The Palestinians, the Arabs or Ishmaelites over in Hebron, and the European Jews are not the true house of Israel. The Samaritan Jews are not the true house of Israel. The Samaritan Jews are the descendants of the Assyrian and Ethiopian people that was brought into there by the people from Cutha and Babylon when you go to 2 Kings 17, and then later on mixed in with the Ptolemies, and then later on with the Caesars. So these are things we want to point out for edification purposes. All right. So once it comes down to this particular matter, once again, on a human level, giving due respect, because I see people saying, oh, that's a good historian. I came from teachers who were historians. All right. I didn't teach myself. I'm not self-taught. All right. So these are things we want to point out for edification purposes. The matter of Edom. Next slide. Let's go on. It says there are records of Edom being among the tribes in Europe. The matter of the Dead Sea Scrolls mentioning Rome as Edom is obvious. Why is that obvious? Because if the Romans were called Edom in the Dead Sea Scrolls, or as well as in some actual quote-unquote Talmudic aspects, one of the things we pointed out, brothers and sisters, is this. If the Romans and the Edomites, as we shown politically, were friends, and Jacob and Esau were brothers, and Jacob is the ancestor of the Israelites will look at, whoa, I know Rome has beef with me, but why is Edom with them too? So when you see Rome as Edom inside of the Dead Sea Scrolls and in other aspects, it ain't too far-fetched, because politically Rome and Edom was attached. That's not saying that the Romans are the lineal descendants of the house of Esau. So one of the arguments given concerning that is you had in the book of Jashir, it says that the people of Edom, where Zepho went in and mixed in with the people of Kittim, and Kittim is one of the descendants of Japhet. One of the things to point out is this: they mixed in and became political allies. Just like the Medes and the Persians during the time of what they refer to as the Achaemenid dynasty under Cyrus II were political allies. Just like the Ishmaelites and the Edomites were political allies against the house of Israel. Just like the Jewish man and the KKK are political allies against the black man, woman, and child in the ghetto. That doesn't mean they all stand on the same premise and of the same nation, but their ideas politically were the same, so you are them. When all the nations cast lots against Jerusalem, Edom, you was as one of them. You was as one of the people out there. Nobody told you to go and jump in somebody else's problem. So these are things we want to point out, brothers and sisters, for edification purposes. All right. So then goes on to say, since we know that Edom wanted to hide himself, could all these teachings have a basis of truth of the identity of Edom? That is to say this: the teaching that Edom is the Arabs of Saudi Arabia. The teaching that Edom is the Jewish man of today. The teaching that Edom is a group of people in Nigeria called the Edo. So the teachings of who Esau is widespread. This is something we want to point out. But remember, he always mixed in with everybody else. Esau himself, the man, mixed in with the people of the Hamites in part. Then mixed in with the Ishmaelites. Then his descendants later on mixed in with the Hamites. Because when you read about them in Psalms the 83rd chapter, in Psalms the 83rd chapter, brothers and sisters, it says what? That Edom and Amalek and the tents of the Hagrites and Zalmunna and Zeba and all these other nations, some of them being Hamites, Edom did mix in politically with Hamites against the house of Israel. So this is not too hard to understand for edification purposes. The next thing is, brothers and sisters, is this concerning the identity of Esau. If you were to go about it politically, it's broad. If you were to go about it genealogy-wise, genetically, is broad. But what are we saying here is that the true Edomites, originally, certainly, definitely, had to be people of color. They are the descendants, Isaac, who were descended from a black man named Abraham. And who was Abraham's father? So these are things we want to point out for edification purposes. Chaldean, according to Godfrey Higgins, we're going to go over later, he stated that Chaldeans were originally what you call today Negroes. So these are things we just want to show for reason and purposes. Edom only had 5 sons. Jacob had 12 sons. Nation-wise, Israel numbered Edom. Edom gets that so much props in the scriptures, or recognition, or clout, if you will, because you're the brother of Jacob and you went against your brother. That's why Edom is always highlighted like, yo, Edom here, Edom here, Edom there, Edom there. This is something we want to point out. Now, when you go in the book of Joshua, the one of the quotes that's made to support the teaching that the average European, the so-called white man, woman, and child of today is the true house of ancient Esau that lived in Mount Seir. One of the things that they will sit there and say is that a descendant of Esau named Zepho, all right, mixed in with Kittim, and it says they became one nation. But you already know you are what your father is. So just as much as Rehoboam's mother was an Ammonite woman, but you're from the seed of Solomon of the tribe of Judah. So you are what your father is. And no, I'm not condoning mixing with other nations. What I'm saying is this, as far as having children with them. What I'm saying is this, even when you go in Isaiah 56, and it says the stranger will be joined on. It says the stranger will be joined on and serving the Most High. The Most High still was not saying that the priests and the Levites, and certainly the Israelites either, were supposed to go in and have children with just all these other nations. Just because they want to serve Yah, if they want to, that's between them and Yah. That's not Israel to say, oh, you can't serve Yah. It's not Israel to sit there and say, you can't sit there and do this or that, because one of the portions that Prince of Paul pointed out is that Israel was meant to be a light to the nations. So yeah, Israelites did prophesy to other nations, tell them about their ways. Like the prophet Jonah was sent out of the tribe of Zebulun to go and tell the people of Assyria and Nineveh certain things. Another matter is the fact that you had Elijah speaking in regards to the Aramean people as far as prophesying to them. Ezekiel prophesied to the Egyptians. So these are things we want to talk about in that particular regard, brothers and sisters. Let that please be noted for edification purposes. Now, next slide. We're going to go on. The matter of the Medes and Persians and Israel. The Medes come from the line of Japhet. That is to say, through his son Madai. And the Persians come from the people of Elam, sorry, E-L-A-M, Elam, or the Elamites, later on was known as the Persians. The reason we see Medes and Persians in the scriptures as a united kingdom can be explained by saying when the Israelites came in contact with them, they were a united kingdom. Cyrus II is Cyrus the book of Ezra speaks of. Ahasuerus is the Xerxes in the book of Esther. So when you read about Ahasuerus, that is actually Xerxes in secular history. Artaxerxes II is the last Persian king mentioned in the Tanakh, the Old Testament, in the era of Ezra. Chapter 7, verse 5. I'm going to ask the brother Josiah ben Prince Nathanael, Chief Nathanael, pardon of the tribe of Levi, to sit there and read. Go to the book of Daniel 7 and verse 5. All right, so we can gain some understanding in this particular regard. All right, and it says this, Daniel 7 verse 5.
And behold, another beast to a bear itself on one side, and it had 3 ribs in its mouth between its teeth. And it was said thus unto it, arise, devour much flesh.
Now, this right here, this bear standing up on one side represents the brothers and sisters, the Medo-Persian Empire. All right. So now by the time the Israelites came in contact with the Medes and the Persians, they was already one united kingdom. All right. Because Cyrus II defeated Astyages of the Medes, and then they became one kingdom called in secular history as the Achaemenid Empire. All right, so this is something we want to point out. I'm going to ask the brother go to Isaiah chapter 21, verse 1 through 2. All right, so we can gain some understanding of what we're talking about. We stated earlier, brothers and sisters, that even if it's not typed in a PowerPoint, things that are stated on here is to be taken as if it is. All right, typed in Isaiah chapter 21. I'm going to ask the brother to read verse 1 and verse 2 so we can gain some understanding of what we're talking about. And it says this, Isaiah chapter 21, verse 1 and 2. Torah.
Hallelujah. The burden of the wilderness of the sea, and the whirlwinds in the south sweeping on. It cometh from the wilderness, from the dreadful land, from a dreadful land. A grievous vision is declared unto me. The treacherous dealer dealeth treacherously, and the spoiler spoileth. Go up, O Elam, besiege, O Media, all the sighing thereof have I made to cease.
So in Isaiah chapter 21, it says, go up, O Elam, besiege, O Media. Now, this right here is talking about Media being the Medes, all right? Coming out of the people of Madai, Japhet. Then you had Elam, which later on in history was known as the Persians. In Isaiah chapter 21 being read, this speaks against Babylon. So now when you read in your own time, as the brother Josiah, Prince, son of Chief Nathanael read in Daniel chapter 7, verse 5, it says what? And 3 ribs were in the mouth of the bear. The 3 ribs represented Lydia, which is eastern Turkey, Babylon, which they defeated BCE, Lydia being defeated in 550 BCE in certain cases, and then Egypt, which was defeated in 525 BCE when Cambyses II ruled as a pharaoh in Egypt in Dynasty 27 of Egypt. So the 3 ribs in Daniel chapter 7, verse 5, when it says 3 ribs between the mouth of the bear, represented Egypt, Babylon, and Lydia. All right, because those are 3 kingdoms that were ruling that the Medes and the Persians took over. All right, so it says the Medes and the Persians were one kingdom, referred to as stated as the Achaemenid Empire. The King Darius in Daniel 9 is Darius the First, who too ruled in Egypt. Darius the First is the cousin of Cambyses II. All right, Darius the Third is the king who lost to Alexander in the Battle of Gargamella. The Battle of Gargamella, brothers and sisters, is recorded in 1 Maccabees chapter 1. So these are things we want to talk about for edification purposes. So when we sit there and deal in this particular aspect, we want to sit there and show the history, how it connects biblically and so forth. Let's go on to the next slide. Thank you. The Persian matter in regards to the Israelites. Now, right here, which we also kind of went over in the teaching court from Avaris to Alabama, is this. As we see there, all right, Lydia, all right, conquered in 547 BCE. All right, Babylon, conquered in 539. Egypt, conquered in 525 BCE. That is the 3 ribs in the mouth of the bear. What you're looking at on the right-hand side comes from the Susan Palace. And as we can see, the people look like what complexion? Okay, that's enough there. Now, one of the things to point out in this, so when you read about Susa, the palace, in the book of Esther, in the book of Daniel, we can see what it's talking about in that particular regard. These are the people that Daniel saw in image form. Did he write any racist Talmudic check talking about, oh, these people were Hamites and they got black skin because Ham lied and his lips is big because he told a lie? No. In your wrote. So these are things we want to point out for edification purposes. All right, the Persian matter in regards to the Israelites. So now, when the Israelites were given commission on a human level by Cyrus to go back and build the temple, we could see the era that is talked about in that particular regard. Next slide. Thank you, my brother. The Hebrews who are in Israel and not from the U.S., what interesting things do they have to say? All right. So this is something we just want to point out, brothers and sisters, for edification purposes in this particular regard. Now, I want to sit there and have this to be heard. All right. In this particular case, I'm going to start at a particular point, turn the volume up a little. All right. And let's start right here. in this particular aspect. All right. It says in my notes 156. That's the timeline that I wanted to hop on. All right, let's go.
On the contrary, the more they humiliate me, the more they oppress me, the more I stick to my land, because this is my land. I'm so rooted. We are deeply rooted as Africans, as Palestinian Africans in this land. And we know pretty well that our ancestors, I'm talking about thousands and thousands of years, had been here in this country, but they were spread away, taken to Africa, from Africa to the United States. So the more they exist, you will find that there is a lot of discrimination, and there is a real divorce between what they say and what they exercise.
Blacks and whites who watch the show saying, so why stay? Why stay when you are called nigger every day? Why stay when you are denied your rights?
On the contrary, the more they humiliate me, the more they oppress me, the more I stick to my land, because this is my land. I'm so rooted. We are deeply rooted as Africans, as Palestinian Africans in this land. And we know pretty well that our ancestors, I'm talking about thousands and thousands of years, had been here in this country, but they were spread away, taken to Africa, from Africa to the United States.
Things I want to point out. In this particular video, he said that that his ancestors would have been in the land, but his ancestors were spread away, taken to Africa, and then from Africa to the United States. This is an interview that was done on BET. All right, so it can be known for edification purposes. This is a man who they refer to as a African Palestinian. Now, according to what they're saying among themselves, is that they are the people of Israel that never left the land ever since the time of Joshua, the son of Nun, in the scriptures. So he stated as shown, all right, where it says that his people would have been in the land, but they were taken from Israel, then scattered into Africa, and then from Africa to the United States. So when we saying that we are descendants of Israel, that was from the land of Israel, taken to parts in Africa, then from Africa to the United States, we're not the only ones saying that here in the Western Hemisphere. There's a guy right here shown and saying it in the Eastern Hemisphere. So this is something we want to point out for evidence purposes. All right? So let's go on, brothers and sisters, in this particular aspect and in this particular regard, and see what we can glean concerning this matter. Now, the Hebrews who are in Israel and not from the U.S., meaning the United States, what interesting things do they have to say? And that was already shown. All right, so when you look at the picture there on the right-hand side, who do you see there with their hats and beards on? In that particular regard, I don't know, not throwing the stone. They look Jewish to me. But so who are they selling? The children of Israel that was scattered off into the United States, the West Indies included. See, look, right there. So these are the descendants of the people that was pushed into Africa and then taken from Africa to the United States. See, this is what we want to show for evidence purposes. This is a picture that was done during the aspect showing enslavement and breaking up of the family. All right, next slide, please. All right, we're going to go on to the next slide in this particular regard. It says, okay, the Jewish people and what they were about. All right, so we can gain some understanding in this particular regard. And it says this: in the 17th century, Sephardic Jews went to Brazil in trade of blacks as slaves. The source comes from a book called The Slave Trade by Hugh Thomas. All right, in the 17th century, Jewish people losing land in Brazil went to Barbados to trade blacks as slaves. The 17th century means the 1600s. All right, if you go into a video on this channel called Old Testament Brothers Speak Regarding Black History, or Old Testament Hebrews Regarding Black History Speak, on the same channel, I'll go into that a little bit more in depth with Barbados in the 1600s. In the 18th century, Aaron Lopez, a Jewish man, was involved in the slave trade. All right, slave trade by Dutch noted in 1613. Before 1630, also in Brazil. In the 16th century, Coronado, Menendez, and Panfilo brought slaves to what is now NM, standing for New Mexico. All right. So it says Governor Yardley, pardon me, George Yardley, governor of Virginia, John Winthrop, governor of Connecticut, and Thomas Dudley of Massachusetts all had slaves permanently. Now, why does this become important? Because George Yardley, as well as John Winthrop, as well as Thomas Dudley, were all in the 1600s. Two of them certainly before the era of what they like to call Anthony Johnson, the first slaveholder in America was a black man. Well, how do you explain George Yardley, which was prior to that, having black people as slaves, having, as well as John Winthrop, who was the governor of Connecticut prior to that, having black people as slaves in the 1640s. So these are things before the Anthony Johnson matter that a lot of people like to harp on happened in the 1650s. But they say Anthony Johnson was a pioneer of American slavery. That means somebody didn't expect somebody to do some studying. You understand? Remember, it was a crime for black people to read. Say they didn't expect you to sit there and read anything, much less history, much less the Tanakh, and certainly not no Hebrew. So these are things we want to point out for edification purposes. Remember, on the left-hand side, it says in the 18th century, Aaron Lopez, a Jewish man, was involved in the slave trade. He was known as a quote-unquote Portuguese Jew. All right, so let's go on, brothers and sisters, in this particular regard. The Jewish man slave trade involvement. Jews became Christians in religion and participated in the slave trade. Some of them known as Diogo Diaz Querido, Lopez and the Riberas, the Gradices, Mendices, and Jean Rigueres Loreno. Now, if I mispronounce these Spanish words, forgive me, but you can see it on a PowerPoint. Some helped the Danish in slave trade, such as Joshua Henriquez. They were called conversos, such as the Jorge or George family in Spain, as well as in Portugal, Fernando Noronha. They actually used in legal aspect the thing called the asiento, which was created by Charles V, which was used by slave traders in the 16th to the 19th century. So these are things we want to point out for evidence purposes. When we see here the Jewish man slave trade involvement, the Jewish man slave trade involvement, the Jewish man slave trade involvement. Okay. During the Jewish Inquisition, many Jewish people were becoming Christians and participating in the slave trade. This is referred to as crypto-Judaism. Crypto-Judaism is when a European Jewish person takes on the name and practices outwardly of a Christian while secretly still being quote-unquote Jewish. All right, so this is something we want to point out for evidence purposes, brothers and sisters. All right, this is a teaching being brought to you from Shema Yisrael, congregation out of Brooklyn, New York. Hallelujah. Now, it goes on to say the Israelites and the Jew. You see the matter? Israel from Judah and Jew from Japhet. So what are we going to look in this particular regard? The left-hand side shows the Assyrians taking people of the Israelites of the tribe of Judah from Lachish into the Assyrian captivity prostrated. Now, the guy you see there on the right-hand side is a picture of Aaron Lopez. Remember earlier, we spoke about this particular guy? When it says Aaron Lopez, a Jewish man, was involved in the slave trade. Then here's a picture of him in this particular regard, so we can gain some understanding of what we're talking about, brothers and sisters. All right, so let's go on to the next slide for edification purposes. All right. The matter of Eldad the Danite and others. In the 9th century AD, a man in Tunisia stated that the tribes of Gad, Naphtali, and Asher went to the land south of the Sahara and settled in Western Africa. They fled to that land to escape the onslaught of the Assyrians in the 8th century BCE. Dan, the tribe, according to Eldad the Danite, left Israel the land when Jeroboam took the throne. That's one point. If you can look up Eldad the Danite, also in the book Babylon and Timbuktu, Rudolph Windsor spoke about that. In his book Anacalypsis, Godfrey Higgins stated that the Jews of old were Negroes. in his book, Tacitus, the Roman historian, book 5, stated that it was popular belief among the Romans that the Jews were from Ethiopia. You're not going to look, brothers and sisters, at this guy, Aaron Lopez, and think that he came from the land of Ethiopia. Okay, so then it goes on to say, in his book, Lost Jews, Louis Rappaport stated that besides the quote-unquote Falashas, there are claims from other quote-unquote Ethiopians as being from the Israelites. So when you go into a book entitled Lost Jews, Last of the Ethiopian Falashas, written by a guy named Louis Rappaport, all right, he stated in that book there are other groups in the country of Ethiopia that lay claim to being of the house of Israel, besides the so-called known Falashas. Themselves pointing out for edification purposes. Goes on to say this, thank you. Related by others regarding the Israelites in scattering. M. Abadi stated, the Semitic origin of the Fulani of the Niger cannot be questioned. That comes from a book, brothers and sisters, entitled Hebrew Heritage of Black Africa, written by Stephen Jacobs. Goes on to say, the Fulani, according to Horton, Slavery in the Making of America, stated that the Fulani were good with cattle. Moses, in Numbers chapter 32, stated that the tribes of Reuben, Gad, and Manasseh were abundant with cattle. And specimens of dialects stated that black Jews are in the central portion of Africa. So these are things you can point out. You can go to a book entitled Specimens of Dialects by John Clark. Not that we Israelites who already know the prophecies need these scholars, but this is just to show for edification purposes. All right, it says that the truth of Yah will come from the earth. Now, it says John Clark of Hunter College stated that after 70 AD, the migration pattern of the Western Asiatic, parentheses, in quote, Hebrew, people went to Ghana. So these are things we want to point out for edification purposes, brothers and sisters. All right, so what we're going to do now, brothers and sisters, is go on, if we will, into the next slide for edification purposes. Thank you, my brothers and sisters. Here we see Clark, who hated Israelites, speaking of the Israelites, and that is at the minute 5:46. Now, reason why I state this, some people, oh my gosh, the Israelites are always trying to bash on other communities. No, what it is, to a certain extent, is John Clark stated that Moses never existed. So you can't sit there and teach that Moses never existed and then sit there and have love for the Israelites. If I stated that Ramses II never existed, I can't sit there and say I have love for the people of Kemet or Tameri or Tashmehu. I can't say that if I'm saying a leader of your people never existed. All right, so that's why I put that in that particular regard. Now it says the matter of John Clark, who hated Israelites, speaking of the Israelites. Now, let's see what this particular elder scholar, okay, had to say concerning the Israelites at 5:46 in this particular regard. All right, and it goes as this. Let's go on.
Humanity. We have been the true believer. Now, after the Romans destroyed the last temple of the people of the Hebrew faith, 70 AD, now you got to watch it. You've got to study the migration patterns of the world. Where did those Western Asian people go? I've seen no migration pattern that took them into Europe. I do see a migration pattern that took a large number of them into inner West Africa, but a large number of people of the Hebrew faith lived in ancient Ghana, lived in peace up until 770 AD, when they tried to collaborate with the Arabs to take over the country, and the Africans expelled them from the country.
Now, in that particular regard, he is saying that the people of the Hebrew faith went after their temple was destroyed in 70 AD, that a large number of them went into inner West Africa, into Ghana. Because in Ghana, according to what we just stated and shown from John Herrick Clark of Hunter College, may he rest in peace, he passed away back in the 1990s. It stated that there were people of the Hebrew faith in Ghana. Now, let's look at the tricknology, if you will, and have a third eye. He's not verbally saying the Jews, the Israelites, the people of Judah, the tribes of Israel scattered into Western Africa. He is saying the people of the Hebrew faith. After the temple was destroyed in 70 AD, he said that he saw no migration pattern as a historian of them going into Europe, but going into inner West Africa, into Ghana. So if that be the case, according to that particular video of him speaking, which is online, you can Google and YouTube a video that is called John Herrick Clark, Who is a Jew, Part 3. And that is where that video is located online. Now, the point is in that aspect, brothers and sisters, is this. He's not going to sit there and make the same clout teaching that the black people of the house of Israel scattered into Africa and were among other black people. He's not going to teach that. All right. So this is something to be noted for edification purposes, brothers and sisters. Now, for the Hebrew faith to exist, that means that the Hebrew faith had to already been known. You're not going to understand the faith of the Hebrews if there were no Hebrews in existence in history. But the teaching, brothers and sisters, of the ways of the Hebrews, in this particular case, the Israelites, because when you talk about 70 AD, you got to talk about the house of Israel in Jerusalem, in the temple, and so forth and so on. Once it comes down to that particular point, their faith, their belief, their ideology, their theology is the Mosaic laws. The Mosaic laws are the laws of Moses that you see spoken of in the book of Malachi in the Old Testament of the scriptures. What is the point in that particular regard, brothers and sisters, is this. Remember, in Kemet, right? When they referred to an Egyptian record, said the Amu, AMMU, and so forth and so on, that is transformed or transliterated, okay, into English as the Western Asiatic. Amu, Setu, Retenu, Tajahi. Those are different Egyptian terminologies, all right? Tajahi, Retenu, Setu, Amu. All of those different terminologies of ancient Egypt refer to the people that is in later on called the people of the Levant. All right? Particular case, we want that to be noted that he was talking about the Israelites, but you're not going to sit there and hold the same rank in the college teaching about the Israelites. Brothers and sisters, designed in that stink that went through from society to society to make sure Israel's name was not known. So this is what we want to talk about for reference purposes. So we take in the scriptures line upon line, here a little and there a little. You can do the same thing in regards to history. Line upon line, this author, this scholar, this author, this scholar, and boom, the truth of Yah is going to be shown through the house of Israel. The matter related to others in regards to Israelites traveling. J. Rogers, all right, J.A. Rogers, in his book, 100 Amazing Facts About the Negro, state that West Africa has black Jews also. We already shown the video where John Clark spoke about it. Okay, as Prince Natan El pointed out, the European Jews come from the Khazar converts in the 8th century AD. According to Arthur Koestler, in his book, The 13th Tribe, he stated that the European Jews are related to the Huns, Uragar, Megayar tribes, then to the seed of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. the Sephardic Jews, Ashkenazi Jews, Samaritan Jews are not the true house of Israel. To explain this, let us understand that proselytizing was common and many adopted the ways of the Israelites. What is that being stated? When you go and read about what happened in 139 BCE, when they got rid of the Israelites, or 139 AD, sorry, when they got rid of the Israelites out of Rome for proselytizing and making people of Rome want to follow the ways of the Israelites, wherever the Israelites went, other people want to sit there and do just like the Israelites in their own style. Even in this society, we're the true house of Israel. Everything we do, other people sit there and seem to want to emulate and do. But then the backdrop to that is, while they're doing their own thing, we want to do this too. That's why this is like Babylon, confusion. So, to that particular regard, the Sephardic Jews, Ashkenazi Jews, so not the of Israel. I said in Deuteronomy 28 that this curse that will be poured on the house of Israel shall be upon you and upon your seed as a sign. So this is why we go so hard with Deuteronomy 28 and how we can show it in line with quote unquote Black history. You understand? Because once it comes down to that particular point, once it comes down to that particular aspect, it's easy to be done. So we ask every other person or nation or tribe or group that's claiming to be the ancient house of Israel, can you go in Deuteronomy 28, which already was stated to be happening in Israel since the time of Daniel? If you can go and show your history linked up to those verses on the curses, then we can sit there and perhaps sit there and just say, well, it is what it is. May the Most High accept the soul. So we're going to go on to the next slide. Thank you. The matter of Isaiah 9, let's explain. Now, why do we go here? Is because in this particular camp, Shema Yisrael is noted as one of the most prominent Old Testament, quote unquote, non-messianic camps that's online and offline. So one of the things we want to state it, because people want to sit there and get into this particular matter regarding the whole Jesus Christ subject, because they say that he's throughout the Old Testament. Let's look at one of the claims that's made. It says the matter of Isaiah 9. Let's explain. For a child born unto us, the government is upon his shoulder, called Pele Hoes El Yibor Abi Ad Sar Shalom. The English in the King James saying this: for unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulder, and his name shall be called Wonderful, comma, Counselor, comma, the Mighty God, comma, the Everlasting Father, comma, the Prince of Peace, period. So why did I sit there and get into this particular aspect, brothers and sisters, in regards to showing the commas and how the King James Version has it, is because linguistically in Hebrew, thing as the translator in the King James wants to impose the Christ theology on the house of Israel. Okay, so let's look at this. It says in this, but Hebrew Counselor, El Gibor, the Mighty God, Abi Ad, Everlasting Father, Saul, Prince, Shalom, Peace. So let's look at this particular aspect. All right, let's get into this particular aspect in this regard. It says a son became known as the Everlasting Father. Now, why do I sit there and ask that particular case? Because according to Christian theology, Jesus Christ, Jesus, who they say is Mashiach, Messiah, is the Son of God. So if we're reading in Isaiah 9 that the child that is to be born is called Everlasting Father, when did Christ or Jesus, as called by some, have any children spiritually or otherwise for him to be known as the Everlasting Father? And if he is the Son that it talks about in Peter in the New Testament, then my question then is, when did the Son become the Father? And then what happened to the Father? And did this Son in the New Testament ever claim to be the Father? Did this Son in the New Testament ever claim to have any children spiritually or otherwise? So these are certain things we want to sit there and point out for edification purposes. All right. So once it comes down to that, all right. Now, what government did JC have? When did JC claim any as his children? Matthew 10, shows that JC could not be the Prince of Peace. Because in the New Testament, in Matthew 10, it says that he didn't come to bring peace, he came to bring a sword. So we already explained that matter on the same channel in a video that is called The Matter of Quote Unquote Non-Messianics. This is also on this channel. All right. So you can type in Shema Yisrael HIC2 when it says The Matter of Non-Messianics on YouTube. And this is more so explained concerning Isaiah 9 and Matthew 10. Just wanted to go into that particular PowerPoint right here just for edification purposes and to ask a couple of questions, because we were asked a couple of questions, all right, regarding this matter. So let's go on to the next slide, if we will. The matter regarding Hebrew origin. Okay. Somebody asked, I wanted to read this right here when it says, what did Yisrael do after 70 AD in a matter of sacrifices? After 70 AD, the temple was destroyed. And actually, to be quite candid, they wasn't even doing sacrifices when they was already scattered outside of the land. When you sit there and read about the matter of what happened with the Masada matter, then Bar Kitto's matter, then the aspect what happened with later on with Hadrian, with the Bar Kokhba, and so forth and so on. In that particular case, there was no temple. There were no people really doing like any sacrifices in that particular regard. All right. Then somebody stated, I wanted to sit there and read some of the comments on that. Can white folks join themselves to Yisrael? Well, I was answer that with the same statement that I spoke on this before. The world is going to join themselves to keeping the laws of the Most High at the end of the day. So it's not even so much as being Yisrael, as more so about keeping the law, statutes, and commandments of Yah. Because the Most High said in Isaiah 24 that the world will pay for their iniquity and the world for their sin. So all nations are going to have to sit there and come under the order of Torah. So that's hopefully sufficient answer in that regard. Where did they get the name Jesus from? I heard two different sources in regards to that. One says from the isos of the Greek, and then another says that isos or isus or what have you from Latin means pig. So I've heard two different aspects in that particular regard. And then we see the troll in this particular video in the comments as well. So we're going to continue on in this particular regard. It goes on to say this. The way to say Hebrew, the language in Hebrew, is Ibrit. The way to say Hebrew, a person in Hebrew, is Ibri. The root of such comes from the word abar, said by some as Ibar. The Israelites descended from the Chaldeans and Arameans, Chaldean paternally, Aramean maternally. The language Abraham spoke was Chaldean, and the language so we can gain some understanding in that particular regard. Kane, I actually saw the comment from the person. We're going to continue teaching this. We do. The Israelites were called Hebrew by outsiders, yet called others Hebrew. The style of writing we see in ancient Hebrew is a Canaanite style of writing, yet the pronunciation of such wording is not Canaanite. Since the language of both the northern and southern kingdoms were different than that of the Ugaritic / Canaanite aspect, the commercial / generic name Hebrew, who were in this regard, the Israelites, is how what is called Hebrew became known. The style of writing we see today as, quote, Black Hebrew is Aramaic in writing. Aramaic and Hebrew are cousins. In linguistics, Hebrew is listed as part of the Afro-Asiatic languages. What is referred to as modern Hebrew is ancient Hebrew with a modern term. Example, qarar, meaning to be cool as the verb. Mikwarer, refrigerator. All right, so that's just something I want to point out for edification purposes. All right, so once it comes down in that particular regard, you do have the word mikwarer, means refrigerator. Qarar means to be cool. Okay, so this is something we want to point out with that. By adding the suffix of the mem, you change it from a verb to a noun as explained within the Hebrew classes. All right, so let's go on into this. What is referred to as Yiddish is not Hebrew. Example, in Hebrew, aim is mother. And in Yiddish, mutar is mother. So even though you see a lot of Yiddish written with Hebrew characters and letters, it doesn't make it a Hebrew word. Just as much as when you look at the word Abba, right? Looking at this particular regard here, A-B-B-A. Abba means father, but that's written, as for those in the comment board there, in English letters. It's written in English wording or lettering doesn't mean that it's an English word. Just because something is written in a Hebrew letter, a Hebrew word. To be noted, one must understand certain aspects in that regard. Please, and reason. And it says this: when we hear the argument that Hebrew has no vowel, one is saying that Hebrew has no sound. Vowels make sound. Spoken languages that are not written. Fire offering is Ishe in Hebrew, and woman is Isha. Hebrew holds the same written form. The same way you say woman in the Hebrew is Isha. The same way you say fire offering is Ishe. As we went over in the same channel, the video that's entitled Hebrew is Not Yiddish, on the same channel, Shema Israel HIC2, we shown evidence of such. The argument stating that Hebrew is a Canaanite, and as some say, yes, an Edomite language, is also not true. Judith, the wife of Edom, Yehudit, may very well have a different root and meaning than Judah, said in Hebrew as Yehuda. Now, to show more examples of that, Babel in Hebrew and Babel in Babylonian are not the same. Babel in Hebrew means confusion. Babel in Babylonian means the gate of the God. Bar in Hebrew is different than bar in Aramaic and English. Bar in Hebrew means clean or pure. Bar in Aramaic, which is his cousin language, means son, S-O-N. All right. In English, bar is where you go to when you want to drink. All right. So next thing is this. All right. It says this. Bar in Hebrew is different than bar in Aramaic and English. One must know transliteration, translation, and reason. All languages come from the Most High. Why do I say reason? The definition and the translation and then the reason of Jacob being named Israel are different. Jacob was named Israel because it says you have striven with God and man and are able to prevail. But the definition of the word Yisrael means God will contend or let God contend. So that's what that's talking about. So the literal definition or translation of Yisrael is let God contend or God will contend. Whereas the reason why Jacob was given that name had a different aspect. So the reason why something is translated and the translation of something may be different reasons. So this is something we want to point out for edification purposes. Next slide, please. Hebrew, ancient and modern. All right, so let's go into this particular aspect. You have written there on the left-hand side, the ancient Hebrew aspect. Now, let's understand this. Ancient Israelites did not call their language ancient. One more time. Ancient Israelites did not call their language ancient. So this is something we want to point out for edification purposes, brothers and sisters. So now, when you look at the right-hand side, which is called modern Hebrew, as we stated earlier, this is on the right-hand side, block form Hebrew, which is actually Aramaic in writing. This is an Aramaic alphabet. It's not an Assyrian alphabet. It's an Aramaic alphabet. So that's why you even see that form of writing that you see on the right-hand side there inside the Dead Sea Scrolls, which was written by Israelites. All right. So this is something we want to point out for edification purposes. All right. Now, let's go on, if we will, to the next slide. All right. Hebrew, very ancient and ancient. Hebrew writing from, now you're looking on the left-hand side, and this comes from a book called The Ancient Near East in Text and Pictures. All right. You see that right there in that regard. It says Hebrew writing from Samaria, one place. Gezer, another place. Siloam, another place. Lachish, another place. Seals, that is to say potsherd, in which they found like vases or anything with Hebrew writing on it. Leviticus fragments, Elephantine, and Eshmunazar. So this is what we want to point out for edification purposes. The Meisner Papyrus and the Eshmunazar sarcophagus both contain Hebrew writing, both dated to the 6th and 5th centuries BCE, respectfully. All right, you can actually sit there and look that up in that particular regard. All right, so the Meisner Papyrus is dated to the 6th century BCE. The Eshmunazar sarcophagus is dated to the 5th century BCE. So what is the point of this? If they found Hebrew in archaeology from Samaria, they said that must be the Sumerian form of writing. If they found it in what they call the Gezer calendar, dating to the era of Solomon, they'll sit there and say, oh, that must have been from Gezer form of writing. If they find it in Siloam, which dates to the era of Jeremiah, Isaiah, which is 60 years before Jeremiah, they will say, oh, okay, that must be the Siloam writing in the time of the Siloam inscription when you read about the Hebrew that's dated to the time of King Hezekiah, correlating to the time of the prophet Isaiah. The Lachish letters that we spoke of before that spoke about Edom being found dating to the era of the 6th century BCE. Okay, then the seals or the potsherd, then the Leviticus fragments, elephantine dating to the 5th century BCE. So these are things we just want to point out, that when they talk about Hebrew, very ancient and ancient, different Hebrew writing forms, even before the so-called modern Hebrew was written, they had different times from the era of Solomon to the era of Jeremiah in alphabet form. The way they wrote one letter in one BCE year may have been different in form of writing 300 years later. That's the point. So when you sit there and see, for instance, this particular aspect, the Hebrew writing that you see on the Gezer calendar dated to the era of Solomon is not a different language than the era of Jeremiah. It's just written with a different alphabet form. In English, they have calligraphy. In English, they got script. And in English, they got block. It's nothing new under the sun. All right? So these are things we just want to point out for edification purposes. All right? Let's go on to the next slide. Now, Yaaziah and Jeroboam, seals of the ancient. What you're looking at on the left-hand side is Yaazniyah, written in the top part in the Hebrew. All right? Written, always remember, Hebrew's written and read from right to left. All right? Now, what you're looking at on the right-hand side, it says Shema Ebed Relabam, which means to Shema, the servant of Jeroboam. So both of these are written in ancient Hebrew, or what is called today ancient Hebrew aspect. All right? I'll use the term ancient just for edification purposes. Because remember, if you go back here, right, and you see Samaria, Gezer, Siloam, Lachish, Leviticus fragments, elephantine, and Eshmunazar, brothers and sisters, they didn't call this ancient Hebrew, wrote their language. We call it that today to make timeline and placement and so forth and so on. But those people in those days at times, like, they didn't even call their timeline BCE. The whole AD and BCE era was created in the year currently known as 525 AD. You understand? So these are certain things by a guy named Examizer. I'm gonna sit there and put that reference inside of the comments later on. So these are things we want to point out for edification purposes. Now, when you look at this particular aspect, brothers and sisters, looking at the seals and the impressions and so forth and so on, that's from the ancient house of Israel from different eras in time. Next slide. Thank you. Now, brothers and sisters, giving honor and praise to Yah, the creator and the maker of heaven and earth. The title of this is called The Matter of the Edomites and the Matter of Ahayah. Now, why does this become important? Because whether you are Old Testament based, if you will, quote unquote, non-messianic, or if you are, as many Israelites are, quote unquote, messianic, there are some, and it's not all, quote unquote, messianics. Some, not all, state that the name of the Most High is not what some other Israelites say as Yahuwah, Yahuwah, Yahweh, Yahuwah, Yahweh. They're saying that what is known as the tetragrammaton, or the YHWH. Tetragrammaton is a Greek term meaning 4 letters. That's what it means. All right. Tetra means 4, like the game Tetris. All right. Gramma means like letter. Tetragrammaton in Greek means simply 4 letters. All right. So that's something we pointed out in that regard. Now, the matter of Ehyeh said as Ahayah by some. The teaching of the name of the Most High as Ahayah is not accurate, nor can it be substantiated in linguistics, etymology, or history. The word Ahayah is Ehyeh without vowels, and the proper meaning of such is I will be. The following quotes are evidence. Now, if you will, brothers and sisters, go into Exodus chapter 4, verse 12, so we can gain an understanding of what we're talking about. Exodus chapter 4, verse 12. And it says this in the English. Okay? Now, therefore, go, and I will be with thy mouth, and teach thee what thou shalt say. When it says, I will be with your mouth, the Hebrew says, Ehyeh b'picha. Ehyeh is said, as shown there, said by some as Ahayah. So they say, oh, no, there's no vowels. Everything is just ah, which is peculiar because ah is a sound, ah is a vowel. But that's neither here nor there in this particular regard. So if we were to sit there and then say the name as Ahayah or Ehyeh, how then, looking when you get your own time into the Hebrew of Exodus chapter 4, verse 12, it says, I will be with your mouth. I will be is Ehyeh. Ehyeh b'pika. Ba means with. Pika, your mouth. Pe, mouth, pika, your mouth. Ehyeh b'pika. I will be with your mouth. So that's one thing to point out. Then let's go to Exodus chapter 4, verse 15. And thou shalt speak unto him, and will put the words in his mouth, and I will be with thy mouth. Once again, we see I will be. And as stated, I will be in Hebrew is said as Ehyeh. Said by some saying Hebrew has no vowels as Ahayah. So these are things we want to point out for evidence purposes. Let's go on to the next slide. Let's go to 1 Samuel chapter 18, verse 18. So we can gain some understanding of what we're talking about in this particular regard. 1 Samuel chapter 18, verse 18, brothers and sisters. And it says this, all right? And we read the following. And David said unto Saul, who am I, and what is my life, or my father's family in Israel, that I should be son-in-law to the king? Now, let's look at the Hebrew in that particular regard. It says, Wayomer Dawid el Shaul, mi anoki, umi chayai, mishpakat abi ba Yisrael, ki ehyeh, katan la melech. Now, I bold typed in that particular aspect, in that particular regard, to show it in different color form. But that's the Hebrew of 1 Samuel chapter 18, all right, verse 18 of 1 Samuel. 1 Samuel chapter 18, verse 18, it has the word Ehyeh in there. Now, for those saying Hebrew has no vowels, they would say that's properly pronounced as Ahayah. So let's go back, and they're saying that that is the holy name of the Most High. So let's go back and see where the Most High's name or any attribute of the Most High, like Lord or God, is said in there. And David said to Saul, who am I, and what is my life, or my father's family in Israel, that I should be son-in-law to the king? Where's that in there? David spoke about his family. Speaking of Saul, it says about himself. Son-in-law is the word katan, la melech. Melech we know means king. Okay, so we just want that to be noted. Now, Ezekiel chapter 34, verse 24 is what we see here. And I, the Lord, will be their God, and my servant David prince over them. I, the Lord, have spoken. So let's look at this particular thing in this particular regard right here. The Hebrew says, Wa'ani, Yod He Wahe, Ehyeh Lahem Lelohim, Wa'abdi Dawid, Nasi Batokam, Ani Yod He Wahe Di Barti. Dibarti means I have spoken. So we're looking at Ezekiel chapter 34, verse 24. Now, you see the bold type part and put into white letter form on the left-hand side where it speaks about David in the Hebrew there. Ehyeh means I will be. And then look at the English on the right-hand side. And I, the Lord, will be. I will be. Ehyeh, I will be. So the name of the Most High is not Ehyeh or Ahayah. You see? And this is why when the Hebrew in the book of Samuel 18:18 has it, you don't see nothing, no disrespect intended, of the Most High name in there. Because David wasn't talking in that particular verse about the Most High. So these are things we want to point out for evidence purposes. All right. And I, the Lord, will be their God, and my servant David, prince over them. The prince that will come out of the house of Israel is named in the scriptures. David's line was not cut off. All right. So let that be noted. So when we read earlier about the guy, Michael Grant, where the Edomites and Romans and the Batians tried to sit there and get rid, okay, of that particular aspect, the seed of David by Yah is still in the earth. See, you can't destroy the work of the Most High. See, so let that be noted and understood. All right. So it says, and I, the Lord, will be their God, and my servant David, prince over them. I, the Lord, have spoken. Now, what will happen in argument form with those who are disagreeing by saying that the name is Ehyeh, the name is Ahayah? The argument form that will come from them is, well, that's Yiddish. So we're going to sit there and expound on this particular aspect, because you can't hold up the King James Version and then as an authoritative book and then sit there and hate on the Hebrew that you see on the slide there, because that Hebrew predates the King James Version. Okay, let's go. So let's go in Exodus 3 and Exodus chapter 20. Exodus 3 chapter 14 says this, and God said unto Moses, I am that I am. And he said, thus shalt thou say unto the children of Israel, I am has sent me unto you. So now let's look at this particular aspect in this particular regard, right? It says in the Hebrew, Vayomer Elohim El Moshe, Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh, Vayomer Kol Tomar Libnei Yisrael, Ehyeh Shalachani Alekem. So what are we looking at? What is bold type there in the white form there in the Hebrew? You can look this up online as well. All right. Many ways say is as Ahayah, but we already shown where Ahayah or Ehyeh in the proper form with Hebrew understanding, all right, is said by David, speaking of David. David was speaking about himself in 1 Samuel 18, verse 18, as shown there. So now when we get to here, the Most High, when Moses said, what name shall I give to the people? Let's understand something. Name in Hebrew is Shem. All right, Shem in certain cases. And it means name, fame, renown. So this is something we want to point out for edification purposes, brothers and sisters. All right, somebody typed in, I'm looking at the screen, it says that Exodus, that 34:24 is a head buster. They can't get around that one. Hallelujah. Head buster. And then somebody else typed in Ezekiel 34:24 settles that matter. So giving thanks to the Most High, Ezekiel 34:24 does close that case, hands down. All right, we already went over that, giving glory to the Creator, maker of heaven and earth. Now, when we look, brothers and sisters, in this particular regard, it says, I am the Lord thy God who brought thee out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. Thou shalt no other gods before me. In there in the Hebrew, Anoki Yohewah Elohecha. Asher Zetika me Eretz Mitzrayim me Beit Abadim. Lo Hiye Laka Elohim Akerim Al Panai. So what was I pointing out in this particular regard? All of the PowerPoint that's in white is put in white there for a reason. All right. Now on the right hand side, where it says Yod Hey Wah Hey, he was, who is, who will be. That's there. Then the other part that's bold typed there in white is Yod Hey Yod Hey. Yihyeh means it will be or he will be. He will be or it will be. Ehyeh means I will be. This is what we want to point out. So to be quite candid, I am in Hebrew is actually said as ani or anoki. Ani or anoki. Okay, so it is actually a mistranslation when they say it as I am that I am is in Hebrew as ehyeh, because it really means I will be. So this is what we want to point out. Exodus chapter 20, verse 1 says in the English, I am the Lord thy God. I've asked people who are saying that the name of the Most High is Ahayah. How do you then say, I am the Lord thy God in Hebrew? Because if I am, let's take the great I am is Ahayah. And we're singing here, I am the Lord thy God. How then do you say, I am the Lord thy God in Hebrew? The argument will come back and we're going to deal with that. Well, the word Lord in Hebrew is Baal. Oh, baby, we sat there and went through all of this already in these classes. You understand? So we want this to be noted for edification purposes. And when no offense intended, the brothers who promote the concept of Ahayah as the name went to debate, not to be racist or racial. The white dude, James White, he sat there and asked, so are you telling me that the Masorites went into the Dead Sea Scrolls and inserted that name in there? Could you see Yod-Heh-Wah-Heh inside the Dead Sea Scrolls? So this is something that, no, Israel, we got to learn our Hebrew. We calling ourselves Hebrew Israelites. The classes are online for those who want it. There's a class that's being promoted here in Shema Yisrael, and there are classes that another Israelite sister does. You understand? So you can look that up if you care to. All right, next slide. The matter of Ehyeh / Ahayah, part 2. Exodus chapter 3, verse 14 to 16. Exodus chapter 1, verse 1 through 2. And Numbers. And Numbers chapter 15, verse 14 to 41. Let's read that if we will. Numbers chapter 15, verse 40. It says this, that you may remember and do all my commandments. Now, this is speaking about the Lord of Fringes. It says that you may remember and do all my commandments and be holy unto your God. I am Yah, your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt to be your God. I am the Lord your God. So in Exodus, when we see Ehyeh, I will be, okay, what did the Most High become? Your God. How did he become your God, your Elohim, your power? It's by showing his power by bringing you out of the land of Egypt. So when Moses was told, tell the children of Israel, I will be what I will be, that's leaving it like, okay, what will you be? And the Most High stated what he became to the house of Israel. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt to be your God. Ani Yod-Heh-Wah-Heh Eloheka. Asher hoziti etkem eretz Misraim, lihiyot lakem lelohim, ani Yah Elohim. So what is being stated, brothers and sisters, lihiyot, to be, to become. He brought you out of Egypt to become your God. So when we say I will be, that which I will be, he became the God of Israel by bringing them out of the bondage. This is what we want to point out for edification purposes. Now, on the other side, on the right-hand side, in the yellow part there, where it says the places where the name Yah, Yahoo, Yahoo can be found external. Now, when we say external, we mean outside of the canonized scriptures that we have of today. So in this particular regard, so we can gain some understanding for edification purposes. Now, it says in one part, the Lachish Ashtakan. Another part says the Dead Sea Scrolls. We already explained that. Another part says the Silver Scrolls. Another part says the Misha Stela. Another part says the Los Lunas inscription. Another part says the Arad tablets. So you can actually look this up, and I put it here so you can look it up. Yod-Heh-Wah-Heh or YHWH. Inside of the Lachish Ashtakan, the Dead Sea Scrolls, the Silver Scrolls, the Misha Stela, the Los Lunas inscription, and the Arad tablets. Okay, next slide. The matter concerning the Arad and Silver Scrolls, dated to and dated to the era before Herod. We spoke about Herod, the Idumean of Esau and everything. Why that becomes important is because the brothers who are teaching that the name of the Most High is Ahayah is saying that the Yod Hey Wah Hey, said by some as Yehovah, said by some as Yahweh, said by some as Yahuwah, said by some as Yahweh, and so forth and so on. They're saying that YHWH, that's paganism and it's evil and it's a god of the Edomites. So let's see what it says in here. It says the matter concerning the Arad, which is the Israelites people, okay, and silver scrolls. Arad Astrakhan, temple of Yahweh, Zedekiah. Zedekiah was an Israelite, okay? To my Lord Eliashib, may Yahweh concerning himself with you, with your well-being. And now, give Shemaiah a letek measure of flour. And then it goes on to speak in that regard. But when you look at this particular regard, you see the Yod Hey Wah Hey inside the Arad, which is in the land of Jerusalem, from Jerusalem to Eliashib. So the Arad Astrakhan, it says letter sent from Jerusalem to Eliashib. What does that also confirm? That the modern shown place called Jerusalem today is not the ancient Jerusalem. Look, it says Arad is the true land of Jerusalem. And even if you look at this, it says the Arad letter sent from Jerusalem. So what they're calling Jerusalem on the news, on Channel 7 and all these other news stations, is not the land of true Jerusalem that David had. It's still in the Holy Land, but it's not the holy of the holy cities. And this is just a point to be made. The place that's called Jerusalem today, geographically, was in the land of Ephraim in ancient days. And the land of Arad is the true land of Jerusalem, which is located in the ancient times, would have been in the land of Benjamin or Benjamin. So these are things we just want to point out for edification purposes. Now, let's look at what is referred to as the Ketef Hinnom. All right? It says this. All right? All right? It says this. The Lord grant the covenant and mercy to those that love him and keep his commandments. All right? So we can gain some understanding in that particular regard. Now, what you're looking at on the right-hand side to the extreme right side of it is the Ketef Hinnom and what is called the Silver Scrolls. And this is part of the book of Numbers that they found in archaeology. All right? So you see the Yod Hey Wah Hey in that particular regard as well as Yah being mentioned in that particular regard as well. These are called the Silver Scrolls. The argument that's given when this information is presented is, well, they was serving other gods too. But you're not going to show archaeology where anyone is saying that the name of the Most High is said as this. All right? Or this. So what people unfortunately have been compelled to do is take a mistranslation out of both the King James and the Masoretic text of the Tanakh, right? And then where it says, I am that I am, it says the great I am. Not realizing that the name in Hebrew is named as shame, which means your name, your fame. Your name is good or your name is bad. Your name is your fame. So this is something we also want to point out for edification purposes. When you read in in Genesis chapter 6, when it said the men are renowned, it says Anshe Shem, which means men who are known, men who are famous. All right. So you may want to sit there and get our studying up in this particular regard. You see how we can go to the Astrakhan here and the Silver Scrolls there. If you can sit there and show brothers and sisters any ancient artifact external to the scriptures where before the time of Herod, we want to emphasize on that, where the name of the Most High is said with vowels as Ehyeh, or said by some supposedly without vowels as Ahayah, please show, because we're showing what we're talking about. Okay, so we're going to go on to the next slide. The matter of Misha and Lachish. All right, so we can gain some understanding of what we're talking about in this particular regard. Okay. It says on the right, pardon me, the left-hand side. This is from the Misha Still. The Misha Still is a record written by King Misha of Moab, all right, in which he actually sat there and stated that they defeated the house of Yahuwah, all All right. So the pronunciation of the Yod Hey Wah Hey is said even by Israelites by different aspects, by some people. You understand? So now when you're looking at this particular regard, the YHWH, all right, in this particular aspect, said by some as stated as Yahweh, said by some stated as Yahweh, said by some stated as Yahweh, said by some as Yahuwah, and so forth and so on. One of the things that those who still pronounce the name of the Most High with the Yod Hey Wah Hey, we don't disagree that it's Yod Hey Wah Hey. The Most High, concerning the pronunciation of it, will let it be known when you read Ezekiel chapter 39, verse 7. But you may want to write that down and look it up, Ezekiel 39, verse 7. But one of the things to point out in this regard right here is you're not going to find no archaeology external talking about Ehyeh or said by some as Ahayah is the name of the Most High. We already shown in Exodus when it says, thus shall you tell the children of Israel, my name is I will be, the Most High became the God of Israel. This is why we went from Exodus chapter 3 to Deuteronomy, Numbers chapter 15. Okay, the Lachish letters, Ashtakan, the name of God. Name of God, YHWH, Yahweh. Letter number 2, dated 589 BC or 589 BCE. Why does that become important? Because we wanted to emphasize it before Herod. Herod was the Edomite that made Edom popular in the world. Herod was the Edomite that made Edom popular in the world. So if you're saying the brothers who teach that the name of the Most High is Ahayah, if you're saying that that Yahweh is an Edomite God, then where do you see Edom in this particular regard right here? This is the Lachish letters about Israel and Judah. All right. So this is something we want to go into edification purposes. All right. So next slide, please. The matter of Ehyeh / Ahayah, part 3. All right. The verb we are discussing is the verb Hayah, meaning to be, to exist. Thus, Hoeh means existing, and Hayah means he existed, and Yihweh means he will exist, or he will be, as we went over before. This has to be followed meticulously in these slides, okay? The uses of the yod and the waw must be understood in this matter. The understanding saying that Yahweh means God of devastation is not Hebraically sound. Since we know that the YHWH in root comes from the verb Hayah, we must stay in course with the language. The word nilkam means to fight. Yet we know lechem means bread. Context is important. So this is what we want to talk about. The way to say to fight in Hebrew is nilkam. But if you look at the root, dropping off the noon prefix, you got the lamed, which is the L, the kaf, or pardon me, the ket represented there with the K, and then the mem represented there in the M. Lacham, lechem means bread. But nilkam means to fight. This is why you have to understand Hebrew edification. All right. So one of the things too we would like to sit there and point out, brothers and sisters, is this. When you go into this and it says the uses of the yod and a waw must be understood. If you remember the Hebrew classes that's done on this channel, I stated, brothers and sisters, giving honor and glory to the Most High, that the yod is the thumb of the Hebrew alphabet. Without that understanding and knowing the prefix and the suffix and how the verbs break down and explained, you're lost. This is why you ask people, how would you say in Hebrew, I'm going to the marketplace, I'm going to the store, if you're saying that the I am is the holy name. So every time you're saying it, speaking of yourself saying I am or you're saying the holy name is you? No, of course not. This is why edification purposes must be noted. Okay? Next slide, please, so we can gain some understanding of what we're talking about. Now, what you're looking at on the left-hand side is the word Hayah. Right? It means to be, to exist. And this is taken from the Hebrew book, 201 Hebrew verbs. You have Hayot, Hayo, Heye, Haya. Now, the part that you see there on the left-hand side that's actually in the brackets, it says there, Ehyeh, I will be. Then under that says Tihyeh. Remember, look at the part where it says future. So this shows the past tense, the future tense, and the present. So the part under that on the left-hand side of the PowerPoint, in the brackets, you see it under the word future, meaning the future tense. Echye, I will be. Tichye, you will be masculine. Tichye, you will be feminine. Yichye, it will be or he will be. Tichye, also meaning she will be. Nichye, we will be. Tichyu, you masculine plural will be. Tichyena, you feminine plural will be. Yichyu, they will be. Tichyena, they will be feminine plural. So this is just to point out. So if I was speaking, if I had two daughters or two nieces, and I were to sit there and say Tihyena Bachanut, and I say you will be in the store, that's what I'm talking about for edification purposes. All right, now let's look at this. Ahayah. This is said, I am. An ancient original Phoenician Paleo Hebrew, the language that Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Yashar'Allah, spoke. Exodus chapter 3, verse 3 through 15. Ahayah, I am, is the only name given unto Moses himself in Exodus. The only name given to the children of Israel, Yashar'Allah. The only name given unto all generations forever, which is a lie because it says his name as Abraham, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob is. But we're going to go on. There is no other name given. So I guess in Exodus 6, when he said my name, Yod-Heh-Wah-Heh, I guess that's supposed to be often. Okay, then it says all other names are of Satan, the devil. That means whoever is promoting Ahayah as the name, you're going to need to come up with your own Hebrew scriptures, because every Hebrew scripture you see, you're going to see the Yod-Heh-Wah-Heh in it, whether it be old ones or new ones. So you need to come up with another one, something. Okay, so it goes on to say this: all other names are of Satan, the devil. The devil has many names and fools the whole world. Ahayah, Asher, Ahayah, I am that I am, is the God of the Hebrew Israelites. Now, this is a meme that was already posted by some people. Ahayah, I am. As stated and asked, if that is the case, how would you properly then in Hebrew say in Exodus 20, I am the Lord, your God? Because if I am, it said as Ahayah, and you're saying that is the holy name of the Most High, and then the Lord in Hebrew is translated in Leviticus and other parts into the Hebrew you're speaking as Ahayah. So that would mean Exodus 20 would say Ahayah, Ahayah. I am Ahayah. How would you speaking of yourself? Saying I am going, I am seeing, I am doing. How would you say that in Hebrew? Brothers and sisters, Ahayah said in Hebrew with vowels correctly as Eke does not mean I am, nor is that the name that the Most High gave to the children of Israel forever. His name as the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, when you go to Exodus chapter 3, is the name that he stated forever. That is who Elijah called on before fire came up out of the heavens or came from the heavens. When you go to 1 Kings chapter 18. Now, let's look at this. Not to be nitpicky and dogmatic or anything of that sort, right? It says Ahayah equals I am. The original Phoenician Paleo Hebrew. You know what the problem with that sentence is this? Phoenician is much, much, much later than the time of Moses. One. Secondly, Paleo, all right, is a Greek word meaning ancient. Word Paleo is ancient in Greek, just as much as kedem or quedem in Hebrew means ancient in Hebrew. So when you find many Israelites, all right, saying the Paleo Hebrew, it's like, yo, this is deep, the Paleo. Paleo is only the word in Greek for ancient. So if you're speaking and saying it's the Paleo or it's the ancient, you're saying the same thing, one in Greek, the other in English. It's not that deep. This is why we must pick up a dictionary. We must pick up a book, do some studying. You understand? So this is for edification purposes. Now, as we went over before, all right, in the older Hebrew classes on this channel, lesson number 27, when we went over the aspect of Phoenician, the word Phoenician comes from the Greek word meaning purple. This is something you can just look up. So when somebody makes a meme, and I mean no disrespect intended, I'm sure whoever, like we're all in Israel trying to get the word out to our people, meant it from sincerity of heart. And it's not saying I've never made a mistake. It's not saying I've never been corrected. But we want this to be known for edification purposes. All right? It says, I am an ancient original Phoenician Paleo Hebrew. Now, of course, in many cases, people are redundant, but when you sit there and say ancient Paleo, you said ancient in the same sentence 2 times in 2 different languages. Just look the word up. I'm not trying to be funny. Paleo is the Greek word meaning ancient. But Israelites, I not say this in emotion, in spirit, and in feeling, but this been going on for quite a while. And a lot of Israelites will say it's paleo, the paleo, the paleo, the paleo. Not really. Hold on. You're saying Hebrew has no vowels. So there is no O, no U, no E, but you're saying paleo. So where, you understand? So how would you then say ancient Hebrew in Hebrew in what you're speaking? Hebrew had no vowels, but what you're calling ancient Hebrew or correct Hebrew is known as paleo, but there's no E and O in the Hebrew that you're talking about. Israel, your foxes or your prophets are like foxes in ruins, says Ezekiel. And that's why nobody yet in the 3 years I've asked, when they always argued with me and others about the name is Ahayah and is I am. So how do you say I am the Lord? That's never been answered. I've gotten comments like LOL, smiley face. I'm like, you know what? Block. Next, block. Proverbs 14 verse 7 is why. All right, so next slide, please. The matter of Baal in Hosea chapter 2, because these are some of the things that have been taught and promoted concerning this kind of subject matter. All right, the definition of Baal in noun is Lord or Master. This can be found in Exodus chapter 22 verse 8 and Judges chapter 19 verse 23. The word Baal as a verb means to marry. This can be found in Deuteronomy chapter 24 verse 1 and Isaiah chapter 62 verse 5. Okay, Hosea chapter 2 verse 16 and 17, and Jeremiah chapter 31 verse 32, and Isaiah chapter 54 verse 5. Let's look. Isaiah chapter 54 verse 5 in the yellow on the right hand side. Bo alayik, the bet in the kolam. Remember, been following Hebrew classes. This is cakewalk. All right. Bo, the ayin and the patak. The lamed and a patak follow with a yod is the I sound. The kirik making the E in the shawar within the kafso feet. Bo alayik. Now let's read Isaiah chapter 54 verse 5 and see what it says there within the aspect of what? The English. Isaiah 54 verse 5. And we read on this regard, brothers and sisters, it says this. The book of Isaiah chapter 54 verse 5 says this. For thy maker is thy husband, the Lord of hosts is his name, and the Holy One of Israel is your Redeemer. The God of the whole earth shall he be called. So, the Holy One of Israel is Yah. So, when it says your maker is your husband, remembering that the verb, V-E-R-B, the verb Baal, means to marry. So when it says Ba'alayik, that's where you get your husband in that regard. As the brother Prince Nathaniel spoke about, Israel is the wife of the Most High. All right? Isaiah chapter 54, verse 1. All right? It says Be'ula. Let's see what the English says in this particular regard. Isaiah chapter 54, verse 1. So we can gain some understanding of what we're talking about in this particular regard. And it says the following. Sing, O barren, thou that didst not bear. Break forth into singing and cry aloud, thou that didst not travail. For more are the children of the desolate than the children of the married wife, saith the Most High. More are the children of the desolate than the children of the married wife. You mean they was making children out of wedlock back then? Baby mamas and so forth? Because it says, more are the children of the desolate than the children of the married wife. That should tell us something about our families. But getting back into this particular regard, Be'ula means married wife. Remember, the verb Ba'al means to marry. Now, let's look at the Hebrew on that other part. And it says this, Ki yib al ba'kur betula. Yib aluk banayik. Thos chatan. Al kala yasis alayik elohayik. All right? This is what we want to point out for edification purposes. When you look at the Hebrew in this particular regard, brothers and sisters, I sat there and made it color-coded so you can see the bet, the ayin, the lamed. The bet, the ayin, the lamed. The bet, the ayin, the lamed. When you look at the top on the Hebrew side, the bet, the ayin, the lamed. Then the second part where it says Isaiah 54 verse 1. The bet, the ayin, which is interrupted partly by the wow and then the lamed. But the root is still Baal, which means to marry. So these are points we just want to make out for edification purposes. Let's go on to the next slide, brothers and sisters. Hosea chapter 2 and Jeremiah chapter 31. And it shall be in that day, saith the Most High, that thou shalt call me Ishi, and thou shalt call me no more Baali. Now, one of the things we want to point out is people who teach that Hebrew has no vowels are saying basically Hebrew with an English mind. By that, I mean this. You will look at where it says I-S-H-I with an English mind and say I shy. And it shall be in that day, saith the Lord, that they shall call me I shy and shall no more call me Baalai. But that's not what the Hebrew says. And so let's go into this particular regard. All right. Wahaya bayom hahu ne'um yod he wahe. Tik re'i ishi. Walo tik re'i li od ba'ali. What is being stated there? It shall come to pass in that day, saith the Most High. Tik re'ini. You will call me Ishi, not I shy, but Ishi. Ish means man or husband. So Ishi means my husband or my man. Walo tikre'ili, and you shall not call to me Od. Again, Bali. Bali means what? My husband or my master. But because the English translation don't have Baal translated as that, as you will see in your own time in Exodus chapter 22, verse 8, when it says the master or the Lord, lowercase l in that regard, the Most High is saying that Israel will call Yah, the Most High, husband, and not call the Most High Baali anymore. It's showing in Hosea 2 about the closeness of relationship that Israel will have with the Most High. Jeremiah chapter 31, verse 32. But this is the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel after those days, saith the Most High. I will put my law in their inward parts, and in their heart I will write it. And I will be their God, and they shall be my people. The Hebrew says this. Ki zot habrit asher ekrot et bnei Yisrael akarei hayamim hahem ne'um yod hewahe natati et torati b'quir bam al bam ek tabena wahayiti lahem le'elohim wahemachihu li la'am. Now, the parts in the Hebrew that's not in the yellow, that's in the light blue, all right, that you see there are all connected under the same word Haya. Yod-Heh-Wah-Heh is, Hayah certainly is. Yod-Heh-Wah-Heh is again. Hayiti means I will be. And I will be when you deal with the while consecutive in biblical Hebrew. And Yihyu means they will be. If you remember, brothers and sisters, right, this particular part in the future tense, when it says Yihyu, for those already familiar with reading Hebrew, right, it means they will be. So you see that same word for those able to follow along in the Hebrew words. Yihyu also on the right-hand side of the screen there means they will be. And they will be li, to me, la'am. They will be to me a people. So what is the point in this, brothers and sisters? Israel will have the law written within their inward parts. When it says Israel broke the laws of the Most High in Jeremiah 31, it says, although I was a husband unto them. The Hebrew root word that's used in Jeremiah 31, verse 33, in your own time, will show it to be the root word Baal. Baal got the negative connotation simply because people made idols, wooden images, and bowed down to it and called it that. So this is what the Most High is saying. You're not going to call me what you called your idol. So this is what we want to emphasize in that particular regard when you go to Hosea chapter 2. All right. Now, next slide. No disrespect intended. The problem with La Shawan Kwadash, the teaching that Hebrew with vowels is Yiddish is not accurate. As we explained before, Ima is mother in Hebrew and Mutar is mother in Yiddish. A vowel is a sound that is written. All languages have sound, even if there is no written form of that language. There are languages and dialects too that are spoken to this day that have no written form of it. You can't write, like, take certain parts, like in Africa, there's no written form for all African dialects and languages, but they have sounds and vowels when you hear them talking, okay? One should note that is a sound. Thus written, it becomes a vowel. So to say shalom is ancient Hebrew is not accurate. The word for fire offering and woman are spelt the same in Hebrew. We explained this before. This was explained in Hebrew lesson number 23 last year on this channel. Now, Hebrew lesson number 23 of last year, Hebrew lesson number 27 of and all of the Hebrew classes that were done on this channel will be put inside of the description. All right, so you can see more in depth what this is discussing in this regard. Next slide, please. Thank you. The silver scrolls from the era of Josiah. All right. When you look at line number 6 on the left-hand side, the silver scrolls is what's inside the far left of it, and then updated or shown more clearly is the middle of it with the numbers. And then the modern form of Hebrew writing is on that particular side where 6 has Yod-Heh-Wah-Heh. Yod-Heh-Wah-Heh. The silver scrolls all the way on that side has Yod-Heh-Wah-Heh, dated from the era of Josiah, who happened to actually be one of the righteous kings. The people who promote the name as Ahayah may want to think of this. They believe in Jesus and say it is as Yashaya, and love to use the Strong's Concordance. Strong's Concordance H3467 states Yasha means in verb save. Who then is the Yah at the end of Yasha? So this is what we want to point out for edification purposes. So when you look, and they always quote the Strong's Concordance, they hold the Strong's Concordance in the same manner and in the same level as the scriptures itself. So if that be the case, let's look at what they're talking about. Because in the Strong's Concordance, H, which means stand for Hebrew, for those who already know the formation of the Strong's Concordance, H3467 said that Yasha means to save. So I'm asking this. If you're saying that the name of Jesus is properly said in Hebrew as Yashaya, and Yasha means to save, who is the Yah at the end of that? See, look, for those who are able to follow along in here, they say it's spelled as this, Yasha, Yah, right? But then they're saying that Yah was a fallen angel when you read some secret book of something of that sort. about demons or something of that nature. So the point I'm saying is this: if you're saying then that Yasha means to save, and Yah is at the end of that, and we're only talking about the Hebrew language itself, then how then can you say that the name of Jesus, because you believe in Jesus, which is another subject, but they're not going there right now. We're just dealing with the linguistics in the Most High name. You're saying that is Yashaya, but you're saying that Yasha here means save. So then who is or what is the last part of who you say Jesus' name is in Hebrew as Yashaya? What's the Yah part? Or what or who is that? Next slide, please. The matter of Yasha, Strong's Concordance. As we already explained, you can look this up. Strong's Concordance H3467. It says in the Strong's Concordance, right? To save, be saved, be delivered. Nif'al, to be liberated. Be saved, be delivered. To be saved in battle, be victorious. Hif'il, to save, deliver. To save from moral troubles, to give victory to. The Lashon Kwadash does not acknowledge the matter of Nif'al in the Hif'il. What we see on the left, it's from the Blue Letter Bible online. The Nif'al is the passive of the Qual. The Hif'il is the causative of the Qual. The Nif'al is prefixed with a noon. The Hif'il is prefixed with a hey in the past tense, command form, and a mem in the present tense. Brothers and sisters, in order to understand, and I say this in due humility, giving honor and praise to the Most High, in order to understand the Nif'al and the Hif'il, you may want to check out this channel and the last Hebrew classes we did, starting from March of 2016 all the way to May of 2017. Because in the new updated classes, we didn't get to the Nif'al and the Hif'il stem, but we covered it before in this camp on this channel, giving honor and praise unto Yah. See, you can't say Shalom, Yasha'Allah, Yahweh or Yahweh Allahayim, Yahweh, even. No disrespect to the Most High. You can't say that is proper Hebrew, correct Hebrew, and that the Hebrew I went over earlier on the slides is Yiddish. And then go to the Blue Letter Bible, which holds the same wording as the Strong's Concordance. Because the Hebrew that I'm presenting and teaching in this camp, blessed be the Most High, shows what the Nif'al and the Hif'il is. There is no concordance in support of the Lashon Kwadash. And the Lashon Kwadash basically saying that Hebrew is Abaga Daha Wata Zalamakanasa and so forth. That is not supported by any concordance. So you can't hold a book such as the Strong's Concordance itself or the Blue Letter Bible online concordance itself, and where it shows the Nif'al and the Hif'il, because you're saying that there's no I in Hebrew. You're saying that there's no E in Hebrew. It's said as Hif'il, Nif'al. So once you go to the Strong's Concordance, for evidence purposes in linguistics in Hebrew, the Lashon Kwadash is out the window. No offense intended. And if you only use the Lashon Kwadash, you gotta still then answer the question, no offense intended. If you're saying Jesus' real name was Yashaya, then who is and what is Yah at the end of that name? If he said he's giving glory to his Father. Shalom.